This is our second annual, and it keeps growing. I'd like to start off the meeting with a flag salute. So if you all would please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now if you join me in a moment of remembrance for 9/11. Thank you. Be seated. My name is Blaine Bibb, and I'm CEO of Service Master Building Maintenance and current chair of the Green Team San Joaquin. Do we have any Chamber board members in the audience this morning? They're en route. Well, I'd like to give a special thanks before we start today to all of our sponsors. We have the U.S. Department of Energy, we have Valley Can, the California Association of Recycling and Market Development Zones, On-Site Electronics Recycling, and our generous sponsors of the Green Team San Joaquin. How many of you here are here for the first time? How many of you are coming back? Oh, okay, it's even. That's positive, Frank. That's very positive. We had a bet. It's an inside joke. Now, to get the meeting moving forward, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the day. I'd like to introduce to you Council Member Susan Eggman. She was elected for a second term in 2010, and she strongly believes that social, economic, and environmental justice are possible through the political process. Susan has been a strong advocate for economic development, literacy, reducing crime through community engagement, and she pushed for the city of Stockton to establish itself as a leader in the valley for green job development. Susan is a veteran of the United States Army. She received her BA in psychology and her master's in social work from the California State University Stanislaus, fellow alum. She earned her PhD in social work research from Portland State University. Susan is also candidate for the State Assembly, where she intends to carry legislation to build infrastructure now. Please join me in welcoming Susan Eggman.
Good morning, everybody. So how many are from the Stockton area? Show of hands. All right? And the rest of you are visitors. So it's a nice marriage. Okay, good. Well, to visitors, welcome. And to those of you who live in our fair city, thank you very much for being here today. And when I heard him read that, I think, you know, a lot of people think change is not possible through our political process. And people often ask me why I serve at the elected level and why I continue to be crazy enough to do it again. And my response is always, you know, the question is not why I do it, but the question is why don't we all do it? It is our form of government. It is the best thing that we have going, you know, in spite of everything. And the more we get engaged in it, the more we can make things happen. Because it really is our voices that need to be represented. When I look around this room, I see you all as visionaries, as pioneers, as part of a new economy. California has done a great job. The U.S. has done a great job, right, as world leaders in trying to find ways to reduce greenhouse gas and to make, you know, to save the planet. California, you know, is far and above better than what the rest of the country does. But oftentimes we forget that while we try to save the planet, to be very green, we forget that if we can't create jobs to go along with that, then it's all kind of a loss. Because as most of you know, we have, you know, now we have the new commercial recycling laws that say we must divert, and by 2020, 75% of our waste must be recycled. So that's great, but it does us no good as an economy, as a country, as a state, if up to 90% of that is still shipped overseas to other countries for them to make products out of that. Because places like India and places like China are not always going to want our waste. And as you all know, because you're visionaries, you know that our waste has now become a commodity. And with any kind of economy, we know right now we have a drought going on that is really driving food prices. So it is in our best interest not only to find ways to save things, but to find ways to create things. Frank's got a great vision that this can be at the end of World War II, that we can do it. And that's, I think, California, you're all Californians. I know nobody came from out of state. This, has always been the Golden State, the land of opportunity, the land of entrepreneurs, where we make things out of nothing, right? So now we have the opportunity to make things out of trash, to make things out of recycled products. And that's what will drive our new manufacturing economy, I believe. Because I believe it's possible, I believe it's true, I believe we can do it. But we need partnerships, like the kind of partnerships that are in here. I see some nonprofits here, I see environmental justice folks here, I see government officials here, I see business people here, I see us all coming together, which is really, right, the magic of how things happen, that we bring all those people together to say, yes, we can do it. So, my intention, if I am so lucky to serve at the state level, is to continue that, carry that message, to say, I've seen it done, I've gone out and toured plants, and I know that businesses, like anybody else, needs a certain level of certainty. I was talking with Ron Foster with Foster Farms, and he was talking about the price of grain and the fluctuations that are going on, and what that's going to do to our food. But the same thing goes along with people who are trying to make a business out of recycled product, both in the recycling of it, which can create, what do they say, like 17,000 jobs already, and then the products that we can make from that, another at least 60,000 jobs, and really create a rebirth of a manufacturing economy. So it takes all of us coming together and saying, yes, we can, through tax credits, through incentives, through cow recycling, and through the cardboard. Again, not just to say, how do we create legislation, how do we create regulation? And there's probably nobody in this room that thinks regulation is running perfectly right now. We know we have a lot of layering of things. We know we have a lot of things that make a certain degree of uncertainty. And that is the one thing I think that government should be able to do, or we fail, to create a certain level of certainty, a certain level of a level playing field, so everyone knows what the rules are, the rules don't change midstream, and we can build from that. Because that is really what this is about. Building infrastructure now through policy, through legislation, through partnerships, through folks like the Chamber taking, there's not many chambers around the state who are taking this kind of leadership to say, how do we really bring the players together, create, if people haven't read the white page that's been developed, go to the Chamber, Green Team San Joaquin, under resources, white paper, bin, recycling, and it really talks very specifically about what it is we need and how it is we need to do it. So when I'm at the Capitol, I hope to see all of you there making a whole bunch of noise about legislation that is needed and support it is needed to get these things done. And you certainly have my commitment. I've seen it, I've lived it. I know that, especially in the San Joaquin County, we have agriculture, we have a new healthcare economy building, and we have a burgeoning, and I tell everybody, a burgeoning green economy that I think can be replicated throughout this great state in order to really get things back on track. So, again, I think you're all visionaries, I think you're all entrepreneurs, I think you're all in the right seats at the right time, at the right place, and hard times make diamonds. So, as anyone who's watched the city of Stockton, and people tell me, are you sure you want to go to Sacramento? It's so hard. And I say, do I need to remind you? I said I serve on the Stockton City Council, right? I'm not unaware of hard times, of very hard decisions, but hard times and hard things make diamonds. And the city of Stockton will come out of this sparkly and shiny and able to cut glass. And I believe the state of California will also come out of this recession sparkly and able to cut glass, tough as a diamond and ready to shine for the rest of the world to see us. So thank you all very much for being here today. And it is now with great pleasure I introduce our first speaker, who is Javier Romero with the California Workforce Investment Board. He's been with the California Workforce Investment Board since its inception in 2000. He manages the State Board Sector Strategy Section, which entails its industry sector-specific work, such as the Green Collar Jobs Council, Health Workforce Development, Regional Industry Cluster of Opportunity Programs, and the State Energy Sector Partnership. Please join me in a warm Stockton welcome for Javier Romero.
Thank you for that welcome. First of all, I'd like to begin by thanking Frank for this invitation, for this great opportunity to learn about emerging industry sector opportunity for our state. And I also would like to recognize Jeff Rowe and Casey Hauk for when I called them a couple years ago asking them if they would partner with us on our state energy sector partnership, that he welcomed that opportunity and he's ran with it. And I'd like to begin by telling you a little about the California Workforce Investment Board. As you can tell, I'm not a public speaker, so I'll remember I have to talk into a mic. The California Workforce Investment Board, just indulge me for a moment, is required by every state that receives Workforce Investment Act dollars. This board is an advisory committee to the governor on workforce development policies. So it comes with a whole list of statutory mandates of us, but that tells us very little on how to accomplish those things. Also in our state, we had a piece of legislation back in, I believe, in 2007, which said that that the state board is to develop a workforce development strategy for workforce development at large for the state. And it was to be something that would guide investment in policies for workforce, education, labor exchange, and what have you. The full gamut. And when we received that charge, our initial thought is, well, how do we prevent from being stuck into the discussions we're stuck in at the time and before that, as far as we get together the room of partners and we talk to employers and we try to sell employers our programs, or we talk to our education and other workforce development stakeholders and we share our program and all its requirements, and they do the same, and we basically get nowhere. So back in 2009, the Workforce Investment Board for the state decided that it would organize itself around a framework reference to sector strategies. Industry sector strategy said, basically, before you get too far, make sure you engage industry to find out where are those opportunities that for California workers and where we should actually be training people. Around the same time when we were developing this approach, the Green Collar Jobs Act passed. It was at the time, it was sponsored by the Speaker Nunez. It was signed by Governor Schwarzenegger, and we referred to it as AB 3018. And the charge there, if I were to put it in a nutshell, was California has decided as a policy that it was going to bring down global gas emissions from our part. We had some aggressive goals, and which was cutting edge for the country. And it recognized the fact that by those policies such as AB 32, I'm sure you're familiar with it, I believe it's called the Clean Air Act, and there was all sorts of solar panel initiative. There was a alternative transportation and fuels program that the California Energy Commission oversees. There was all these sorts of policies going on. That was going to have an impact on our economy, therefore our labor market. So AB 3018 said, I charged the board to say, we're aware that you are now going into industry sector strategies. Your first one is going to be green collar jobs. And you are required to have a green collar job council, and which is going to ensure that Californians broadly benefit from that from this development. And that means that we were going to prepare workers, so white collar, blue collar, now green collar. Now, what happened immediately was a lot of money came. A lot of programs came up for solar installers and so on. And the first meetings from the Green Collar Job Council, I actually sat in meetings on the same agenda where we had somebody share the fact that they've launched solar panel installer programs. Later on the agenda, we had people from representing the industry, the association, saying, don't train another solar panel installer. You know, and there was like, there's definitely a miscommunication. And I remember the term at the time that we came to was perhaps curriculum was getting ahead of industry. Well, during this time, as you recall, the Recovery Act was taking place. So they've created all sorts of opportunities. We began from under the mandate of the Green Collar Job Council, began making investments. In an ideal world, this was our vision, that we would, well, already, let me back up a second, we already recognize that there's not one state economy. The state economy or the national economy is made up of a collection of regional economies. So we already were understood the fact that we need to view the economy regionally. So we already, industry sector strategy said, okay, let's start thinking regionally rather than these, I don't mean this sparingly, but these artificial boundaries. Let's view it, be it political, be it due to the Workforce Investment Act in order to disperse those funds. We did so in these what we call local workforce investment areas. But these governmental jurisdictions, these local workforce investment areas, they all participated in regional economies. So we already knew that. So we wanted to invest and be a catalyst to get our local boards to start thinking regionally. And they already were. I mean, let me just say that out front. The best thinking seldom comes from the state. It usually comes from when we listen what's emerging at the local level, at the regional level. When we stop and take that in for a second and then think, okay, how can we make more of that occur? That's usually in my experience, has been the best approach. So we already seen some successes, so we thought, okay, we have the credibility. We could actually point to some best practices, so let's incentivize some regional planning. But at the same time, like I said, there was the Recovery Act dollars and so on, so we already were investing in training. And then we're doing regional planning. And then we were finding that, you know, as you were aware, a lot of the green collar jobs training was not resulting in the placement rates that we had hoped. I mean, I think that's common knowledge now. And we thought ideally we would have done the regional planning, identified the training opportunities, and then invested in the training. Well, they were going on parallel. During this time, the Department of Labor released a funding opportunity, and the solicitation was referred to the State Energy Sector Partnership. And it required each state to develop a state energy sector partnership that would oversee a training program for green jobs. Well, we were positioned well already because we had the Green Collar Job Council already, but we want, and more importantly, we saw the opportunity to get it right, as we thought. So what we did was we started calling people up saying, will you partner with us on the State Energy Sector Partnership? And this is what we would like of you. We would like you to get some good labor market information. What are some of the industries that are emerging in your region that you would like to invest in? And actually, your region would like to invest in. Amongst those people, like I mentioned, Jeff was one of the individuals I called. And we thought this was a good opportunity to get some industry cluster analysis done for the Central Valley, and ask them to identify those industry clusters, identify activities that would support the growth of those industries. And I say support it. These industries already have to be in development. Government's not going to come in and actually start it from the ground up. we could only try to position ourselves to be assistance. And like I said, my job is workforce development. My end game is to move more Californians into good paying jobs. But we recognize in order to do that, we need to ensure that we're putting them in good occupation. There's a mutual benefit there. There's to the industry and to the worker. And so I find it very gratifying in reading the description that how the Central Valley basically, based on their labor market analysis, broke up their regional state energy sector partnership into 3 regions. In the North region, they identified recycle manufacturing as a growth industry. They saw the bin coalition as something already underway, and they partnered. That tells us is, you know, the workforce development system and the partners behind it have positioned themselves to be a partner with this industries and as they move forward. So I give you that background to tell you where we're at with the California Workforce Investment Board. I mentioned I manage the Green Collar Job Council. The Green Collar Job Council right now has been on a bit of a hiatus. Our last meeting was in November 2011. We had a new administration, as you know. It took longer than we expected to get a new board, but basically we do have a fully new board. Their first meeting is going to be in October. From that membership will come the new membership of the Green Collar Job Council. And we're going to reconvene that Green Collar Job Council. And one of the premises that remain from the last administration, this administration, is that we're going to continue to identify regional collaborations that are actually supporting industries that would, 1, are looking to drive down our global gas emissions, 2, that would grow our regional economies, and 3, provide career opportunities for our workers. As you know, the recovery is slow. The nature of this recovery seems like job creation. We're not going to have 500,000 jobs in any given month anytime soon. So each job I believe is going to be hard won, hard fought, and it's going to be happening regionally and beginning with employers that are here today. And we, from the public sector, need to position ourselves in a way that could be, 1, look in our toolboxes to see what can support their needs with the self-interest end game of placing and preparing workers for the occupations that develop from that. If I may, we are currently developing also, there's a lot of new things going on right now. We actually have a brand new state plan. The underlying premise of that state plan is that we are looking for the development or support of regional economic workforce development networks. We then want to find creative ways how to develop relationships from the state to those regional efforts to support industry sector specific partnerships, such as one today. Going back to that regional economic workforce network, we want those to be made up of your local workforce investment boards, your community colleges, your CBOs, your economic development entities, and representatives of those industries that are central to that regional economy, in order to come up with ways to leverage those resources to do the very thing I've been describing thus far. We also want to come up with ways in which we could have an ongoing dialogue. For example, with the State Energy Sector Partnership, the Green Collar Job Council will be charged with maintaining the relationships that spawn from that investment. And we want to know what are some of the issues that are barriers to growth to this industry. Not that the State Workforce Investment Board is going to resolve those. In some we may be able to help, but a lot of them we want to provide the forum in which we could voice those to our state partners. Going back to the Green Collar Job Council, around the table you're going to have GoBiz, you're going to have the various members from state agencies that have their own set of resources. We're going to have a representative from the Speaker's office. We want, they will be at the table. We view our role as two-part. One is identifying issues that the state can address broadly, provide that forum so that then any member that sits at the table has that takeaway, and they could take to their, what I call their daytime jobs, take back to the legislature, take back to the employment training panel, take back to GoBiz as far as that's your piece of the puzzle. You need to resolve that. And one thing we'll do, we'll make a commitment to, we'll keep reminding them of that. Our end of the deal after that role is to go back and see how can we utilize our oversight role and our policy making role over the workforce development system that's primarily funded by the Workforce Investment Act, and how do we position our local boards to be a catalyst to identify partners that we need to link up to. And also, you know, I have a lot of regard for our local workforce investment boards. I do believe they're in a unique position. Often they have the boots on the ground to interact with economic development entities, to interact with businesses, but they also, a lot of them have the background with the social service aspect of their role. You know, they could really provide that nexus. That's my little personal statement. But I view our role is to bolster that. Make sure that, you know, that we're making the kind of investments when we can to give them some money, to seed some planning, to actually look at how we provide. One example I think you'll see on the horizon is we have this one little piece of our system we refer to rapid response. Rapid response primarily is used at this state is when somebody gets a warn notice that there's going to be layoffs, where, you know, we're to respond to that and let them know of the gamut of services you'll find at the one-stop delivery system. There's room there to be a little more proactive, and I know this because there are people already doing it out there to try to avert layoffs. And I think if you're coming from the economic development world, you might see those as business retention services. You know, they're akin to that, and so on. That was one example that I think provides us some room to do some planning, some coordination to support industries such as the one we're focused on today. I feel like I've been talking a while. Does anybody have any questions of me, or is there anything I could clarify that I've said for anybody?
Please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. I don't need a mic. Well, we're on a webinar, Mr. Lautsy, so we need to be brief. I'll hold it.
No, I'm just curious, Javier, if I work in the city of Oakland, I work on green business development, and, you know, the sexiest part of green business is energy, solar, clean tech, green tech. Do you feel like there's a formal recognition that the recycling sector is a major employer and is an already established strong anchor for employment and also for entry-level employment, and is statewide and so on? Do you feel that that's being sufficiently recognized in your work?
With the Green Collar Job Council, I'm afraid I can say it has not. And part of my motivation in being here today is to come up to speed on this. And it's not to say that there's not other parts of the state government that don't recognize that. Often at the state level, you know, we fail to talk to one another. And it seems ridiculous that we would have the Green Collar Job Council, and perhaps we have some full-blown effort on recycling to develop that industry, but it occurs all the time. And part of these functions, such as today, I often find is that I'll meet people at the regional level, meet some good new friends, but also I'll meet some people from Sacramento as well, you know, and say, let's follow up, and so on. So it's us being out here, that's part of the thing. So I would say not, and part of my goal today is to learn more today and actually bring that information as we ramp up the Green Collar Job Council again.
We got one more question over here.
Okay. I've been a recycling consultant for a number of years. I have yet to find a city in the state that has done anything to improve the connection between the packing plants where the materials are actually aggregated and go off to market, and the independent collectors who are out there in their pickup trucks going after stuff. The cities have all been worried about the garbage hauler and all of this kind of stuff, but there's thousands of people making a living, maybe tens of thousands in the state, going out and picking up stuff, businesses, all that kind of stuff. And I wonder how we would get that kind of information to the decision makers.
You know, that doesn't surprise me at all. And I used the term today. I initially started about industry sector strategies, but then I made a transition, probably inartfully, regarding industry clusters. There's all sorts of industries that are interdependent on one another, and we often fail to see those connections. So perhaps we want to focus on one industry and support it, but for us, the workforce training opportunities may not occur there, but there may be a related industry that's dependent upon that industry, that there's some opportunity. And you're actually, yes, you're training people over here, but you're actually supporting the target industry as well. So I don't think I answered your question sufficiently, but part of my learning today is to learn that, just in fact, what other industries are impacted by this industry we're focused on today.
A big thank you to Javier. And I was remiss in saying before that people don't know this, we're also on a webinar. So there's about 100, 150 other people out there also participating with us. And as Javier's speaking, and Frank's got this designed very nicely, that we have, you know, public, and then we're going to have some private people, and then more public and private. So it's a real blend of government and business. And as Javier said, I think sometimes we really have to. So let today be the introduction of right hand to left hand, which often frustrates people, that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And so the more times we can get together like this, we really introduce the right hand to the left hand, and we find different ways to work together. And just as a pitch, any of you out-of-towners who are looking to relocate your businesses, San Joaquin Valley is a wonderful place to do business. We still have a thriving enterprise zone, and we'd be glad to talk with you any way we can. We're having, again, one of those partnerships that can occur. I don't know if people know the city of Stockton, the San Joaquin County is getting 3 of the new prison hospitals in. And the state said they were coming in no matter what we said, and the city of Stockton and the Chamber of Commerce and the county board partnered with that and said, you know what, we don't want you to come in unless you can guarantee us local jobs. And they said, basically, we're the state, we're going to do what we want, and you guys don't really have a say in it. And we reminded them that they needed water and sewer hookup in order to run those facilities. And so we were able to bring out kind of a bigger hammer. So right now, while the state is leading with job growth at about 2.4, Stockton, San Joaquin County is at about 4.2 job growth, partly because of the infrastructure that's going in physically, and that we have about 1,500 people working construction on those healthcare facilities, and then we're going to have hopefully another 2,000 people working in those healthcare facilities. But a part of that we also were able to negotiate was that local people were able to sell their products. So on the 19th, there's going to be a big fair on saying, you know, how can you sell your products then to that state agency? So for folks who have goods to sell, be prepared that there's going to be some big contracts coming out of that in the next couple of weeks. I think that's going to be on the 19th, and I think you can check the chamber website or the city website for that. So anyway, some exciting things going on that we hope to be able to, you make products and the state will buy them, and then we'll have another introduction of right hand to left hand and keep things going around. So now, and we all know that none of this can happen, and the largest growth industry is also from small business, and especially manufacturing, which it always pleases me to no end that we're really having a resurgence of manufacturing. So now we're going to have the private sector panelist, and we're going to have Brian Terrell with the president of American Recycling. We're going to have Steve Kraus with Golden Byproducts, and Frank Kuvak? Savitovac. Damn it, and I went and toured the plant manager with Epic Plastics. So if we could have those gentlemen all come up, please. And they'll present on the global end use and disposition of recyclables in the world market. So it's not just local, it's global. That's how we like to see the concentric circles go out. And then when they're done speaking, then we'll, Frank, walk around the mic a couple more times. Bill Donahue or Oprah, you name it.
So it starts with me. Okay. All right, Frank, I hit my timer, so I will try not to take more than 20 minutes. My name is Brian Terrell. I'm one of the co-owners of American Recycling. I was apprised of this particular group when I was hearing more about the things that were going on in the manufacturing segment of our economy, specifically with many of my customers. I noticed many of my customers were looking at operations in other parts of the state or in other parts of the country. So that got me to think we need to start doing something significantly right now in the state and address it immediately, or we're going to have some real... Am I not speaking? Thank you. Not working? I thought what I would do is a shameless plug really quick of my company and get through that really quick and get to the presentation for the BIN, my portion of the BIN coalition. American Recycling is a full-service commercial and industrial recycler. We service specifically food processing, manufacturers. Matter of fact, many of the large businesses and companies that are directly affected by AB 32 right now. We specialize in zero waste programs. Many of our customers right now, many of the large food processors that are customers, are achieving almost a zero waste. Del Monte Modesto, specifically right now, has gone from 40,000 tons a year almost 5 years ago. They're down to 300 tons. Those are programs that we put in place, and we try to help them achieve their zero waste programs long before it was popular or regulated. We also provide product destruction services. We do their fruit cups, we do tomato cans, tomato waste, peach pits, all kinds of other things that wasn't entirely something that we wanted to get into, but many of our customers requested us to get into it because of our services. And because of that, we're a licensed and permitted hauler in Stanislaus County, the Food Byproducts Residue Program, which is a 30-year-old program that regulates, and it's regulated by the industry participants to help handle some of the food waste, the peach waste, the tomato waste. I wrote the regulations for trucking and hauling of that particular provision in our county, and we set the bar for how the rest of the state would handle food waste from food processors. We also provide a lot of equipment, compactors, balers, air systems, things of that nature, and then all the related equipment and trucking and things that you would get into to be in a recycling business. These are just some pictures of, in case some of you that are not aware of what a recycling operation might look like. We don't operate a little mom and pop with just the cans and bottles and the grocery carts and rickshaws that you see. In some of the recycling operations, it's a big operation. Especially during this time of year for us in the food processing industry, we're operating 7 days a week, almost 24 hours a day. We have some large baling equipment. The upper right-hand corner Right there is a new baler we just put in our facility as an Italian Mac press that helps us get through the day. Some of the other pictures that we have are just some of our customer locations, some of the things that we put in our customer facilities, compactors, even some of our competitor trash accounts there. We provide trash bins for our customers as well. Just some more pictures. Interestingly enough, right there, the colored bin that you see, the tilt hopper, we have found out in the industry specifically, people will not respond to written language. It doesn't matter what language you put on a bin, what you write, they will respond to a color. So we paint our compactors, our equipment that people put recyclables in, we correspond it with the same color tilt hopper. You may not be able to read or write, but you can see. And if you can see that that's a pastel color too, so even if you're colorblind, you can see the difference in the shading. We find that people are very compliant and we get great recycling rates because of that. So that's, I'd like to say I invented that, but I didn't. This is just a quick account real quick. This is Del Monte Modesto. It's an incredibly large food processor. We do a lot of different things with them. And in the top portion right there, you'll see that's another program that we worked on as a partnership with them to invent a way to help handle their food waste, their peaches on site, and make it pH neutral, and we use it in land application and feed. So this was really instrumental in getting them to a zero waste. Now, to the reason that we're here. The Bin Coalition. Well, what really got me involved with this was, again, as I said, I was really concerned about how many of my customers were creating operations in other states, Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Texas. This wasn't out of the kindness of their heart that they wanted to just open up an operation on the other side of the United States. They did this in a direct response to what they perceived as pretty aggressive environmental compliance in the state of California. And they felt that they needed to do this to have another foot out the door. Build those facilities, get things going, get them up to speed, because at some point there'll be just one more drop in the bucket and that's enough. You can't necessarily move fields of almonds and peaches and tomatoes and other products, but what you can certainly do is just package them up here and ship them to the other part of the country where you can process them. That's concerning to me because those are my only customers. I think the issues driving California recycling market, specifically, we always hear about America has a dependence on foreign oil. I think the United States has a dependence on foreign consumption of our recyclables. It is our largest export by far. If you took the other commodities that are sold across the world, they don't come close to what the export market is for recyclables. It's what the United States does best. We get rid of what we consider our waste. And the rest of the world buys it because they see it as a really cheap source of raw materials that they turn into materials that they manufacture and then turn back and sell it to us. Most of the material that is sold in the the international market goes to China. China is the largest consumer of the material, specifically in the Guangzhou province, just inside from Hong Kong. India, Vietnam, Korea, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Singapore, just basic Pacific Rim countries. China has, it is, and it will continue to drive the market for many years to come. It's a large purchaser of our materials. My own company, we ship 10 to 15 containers a day to China. What's changing in China right now is they don't necessarily like the way that we're marketing our free market enterprise, the way that we tend to want to leverage our commodities and make them pay more, and they want to pay less. So what they've done is well, we're just going to reinvent the wheel here. We're going to start sourcing material internally in our country. We're going to develop the inroads to start getting the materials that we generate inside China, bring that back, and we'll start purchasing those at less or no cost. And we will start to drive down the price in the international market. That's not good for a company like American. And they tend to have OPEC-like style pricing, the way OPEC tends to corner a market and control what goes on. For those of you that are in the waste business or recycling business, I'm sure you know of the once a year when we get specifically close to the Chinese New Year, it's like someone shut a light switch off. It's as if China shut the light off and nobody's working. Well, in any kind of business, you can't just shut off the flow for that. That means everybody that deals in recyclables during that time has to either find another outlet, or you need to hold on to it, or you need to do something else. But that's not good for business. That tends to tell me that we need to start thinking of other outlets for finding homes for this particular recyclables instead of being so dependent on one nation to consume our recyclables. By 2050, India is going to be the world superpower with population. They'll be consuming much the same way that China is doing right now. So those are markets that we're seeing emerge right now. The regulatory environment for large producers in our state is just, it's so difficult right now. In fact, I sit, with the California League of Food Processors and the Manufacturers Council of the Central Valley, and I listen to what many of my customers are saying. And I don't know if you've heard this or not, many of them feel that maybe the state agencies are competing with each other. It's not even so much just right hand and left hand, but they're both competing. And that's really difficult. You have a certain agency who will pass a bill that is not relevant to their agency's responsibility, and that's confusing for people. You'll have multiple regulatory agencies doing the same exact thing, in fact, the very same rule, and you don't know who to follow. That's making it very uncertain for large business. They still have shareholders. They still have to show profitability. When you're sitting down for a shareholder meeting and you don't know what's going on, that's a big deal. The other thing I like to point out is that there's just no new paper mills. Several years ago at a conference, there was a new mill, I believe, going in Tennessee or Arkansas, and that was the first one in 50 years. Nobody in their right mind would open up a recycling mill in the state of California. Right, Dimitri? Nobody would do that. You wouldn't make any money. So I have some questions. One of the things I'm concerned about, as well as just the recycling market today, is a little more global than that. What about the end-use disposition? This is something that many of my customers are asking me specifically. I can't necessarily go for where the highest price is to sell their recyclable materials. I have to go somewhere where they know that it's being handled properly. The last thing that they want to see with a large Fortune 500 company is a picture on 60 Minutes with a young 6-year-old boy from Bangladesh with no feet burning copper wire or something in the middle of a field. That's the kind of thing that really doesn't look good for the shareholder meetings, I'm sure. How are materials processed in other parts of the world? Are they regulated? Quite often they're not. Who's ultimately responsible for the end-use disposition? Is it the importer, the country that's importing it? Is it the broker, the recycler like myself? Is it the manufacturer who's creating it? Is it the state of California, or is it the consumer? There's a lot of different questions trying to be addressed. Right now, we see a lot of illegal dump burn sites. We know of them. I have to try and identify them so I make sure I don't sell to those locations. We can see satellite images that will tell you exactly what's going on. What tends to happen, you'll have a broker that says, I'll take everything. Don't worry about it. Really what they want are a couple of key commodities that they'll sell directly through supply routes through Vietnam or Laos or some other country back into the Guangzhou province in China, and then they'll go ahead and burn the other commodities right on the ground or use them in a biomass. So this right here is this is an interesting picture I like to point out. The picture on the left is a picture of China. In the lower portion, right over there would be the Guangzhou province. Shanghai is a little further to the north, and then Beijing to the far north. Those aren't clouds. That's smog that comes from their process, from the burning. I'm sure we all remember the Olympics several years ago where they had to stop all the cars for so many days trying to address the pollution that's going on. If you've seen the pictures of Guangzhou province, it is absolutely appalling. I'm just wondering a little bit about the law of unintended consequence here. If we're pushing diversion, we're pushing recycling, if we're only pushing that just to push this to go out of the state, Frank and I have looked at some weather models, some things that we've seen from UC Davis. This, on the right-hand side, you can see the picture where that smog and pollution hits the Gulf Stream right there, or the stream, excuse me, in the Pacific. It comes right down, and then it goes right through Alaska, right down into right into California. in about 2 to 3 days. So are we recycling more so we can ship this over there so that we can get pollution? Because if AB 341 was an airborne initiative, this kind of seems like an unintended consequence. These are some other pictures from satellite from NASA. The upper left is Indonesia, where we see some of their pollution that they have. They're not unaffected. The picture to the right is India. That's something that we can definitely see. That one really concerns me. The picture to the right in India, specifically, we're looking at the Himalayas right here. Right here is Calcutta, the port where it comes in, and then just above that is Bihar, which is the province where a lot of the manufacturing is occurring. A lot of things are being burned there. Tires. There's a lot of tires being recycled over there. They're using them in their biomasses to actually create the electricity, cheap electricity. So burning tires, burning trash. I have people who call and ask, can I buy your trash? Then the lower portion right there is, this was March 16th, 2012, in the Guangzhou province. This is the, Hong Kong is right here, and the Guangzhou province is right here. This was their worst pollution index on record this year. It's poised to get worse. I think we have some incentives. There's some things that we can do. Cal EPA as a whole, which encompasses obviously several regulatory agencies. I have a lot of hope for the new secretary of the Cal EPA. At one of the meetings that we had here, I think it was at Rexpo this last year, some of the things that we heard were encouraging. This is the first time that I've heard a secretary talk about, we're going to get some people to work together. We need to work together. It's pretty important, and we need to stop some of the infighting and the competition that's going on, and we need to have some more cooperative partnerships in making things work. We definitely need to start addressing some market conditions and end-use disposition of the recyclables that are currently exported from California. I think it's incredibly important. If AB 341 is going to have more recycling, we're going to increase that to 75%. And the end result is that we're going to increase pollution in other third world or developing nations only to come right back into our backyard. That doesn't sound like that's a good plan. We frankly have some outlets here in California. We still do have a couple of paper mills, believe it or not. We have some in Santa Clara. We have some in Southern California. We should find some incentives and ways to incentivize to start using those facilities. With the greenhouse gas, the cap and trade, I think maybe we could do something with a tax credit, some type of credit to the source producers of material. If you really want to affect a change in California for recycling, look at the 20% who's creating 80% of the recycling and the waste in the first place. If you can incentivize how they handle the waste, it doesn't matter who is in between. They will require that it's taken to a certain location. If a company like XYZ company says, well, yeah, but my tax incentive says that it needs to go here to this location in California, that's where I want my material sold, you'll start to affect the change that you want to see. I think you could also do something similar like CRV. Maybe that's something that could be done. I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm just trying to propose some different ideas, because I have some other concerns that when we say California hasn't reached 75% diversion, I don't know, have we? If the Cal Recycle is only obtaining information from waste haulers, MRFs, CRV collectors, and landfills, what about all the recyclers in the state? I don't supply any numbers to anybody. Nobody knows what I send out of state. So if we had all the recyclers provide information and data, I'm sure that would be pretty impressive, what kind of tons are leaving either the state or even being generated or processed. Another interesting topic that was brought up to me with some folks from the manufacturing conference or manufacturer council was maybe we could do something where you have an actual greenhouse gas exchange, a ton for ton. For every ton of recyclables that are generated through a source producer here in California that are kept in California for recycled manufactured content, if that's kept in California, can we get some kind of credit for the greenhouse gas? I don't know. That's a pretty far out concept, but at least we're talking. That's the point. They're seeing their cost of compliance for greenhouse gas and cap and trade, it's climbing steadily. So they're trying to find any solution they can to make sure that they'll require that the recyclables stay in the state. If we refund the RMDZ program, I think that would be a great use of some of the funds from cap and trade. We also need to reinvest in technology. You know, UC Davis has some outstanding bright minds. They're doing some amazing things. Dr. Zhang over there, some of their engineering departments at UC Davis, some of the things that they're doing are just unbelievable. I know, Nick, you had mentioned, you turned me on to a couple of the folks over there, and the more I've been doing, the more I've been researching, the more amazing it is. That's not more in the forefront of what we're looking at. Those folks can probably solve most of the issues that we have. Biodigestion, even from UC Davis, some of the work, talking with the folks over there, I'm already working with folks right now to talk about creative ways to handle our food waste, wherein we're turning the food waste into an end-use plastic. It's pretty productive. Anyway, we really need to grow the green business in California. I know we hear it, it's a cliche. We talk about green business, we talk about growing green jobs. This, I think, is the first time we can actually truly address what green jobs are by creating incentives and incentivizing recycled manufactured content and producers who create the recyclables working together to try and take us to where we want to do and our goals. And I think we definitely need to start tracking what type of recyclables and diversion we have for AB 341. So thank you for your time. My time is up.
Wait for my presentation to queue up. I'm Steve Krause with Golden Byproducts. Golden Byproducts is a tire recycler. We produce, we go collect tires from all across Northern California, and we, anywhere from Bakersfield all the way up through Redding, all the way up to the California-Nevada border through the Bay Area. Golden Byproducts collects approximately 3 million tires a year. And processes those tires, and as a whole, Golden has probably processed 50 million tires from our inception in the waste tire business. Let's see here. Just a quick overview as far as what I wanted to cover today. Little bio on Golden Byproducts. I wanted to cover some industry and market trends in the scrap tire business, some challenges that we encounter every day. What are some necessary changes and possible solutions to overcoming those challenges, and then just any other questions that you guys might have. Golden initially was established in the late 60s, actually, as a large volume materials handling company that originally went and collected prunings from all across the San Joaquin Valley, grinded those prunings up into wood chips, and exported, and then sent those prunings for fuel. As that business deregulated in the mid-90s, Golden was stuck trying to figure what's going to be our next venture. Well, what are we going to do? And actually, we were approached by the esteemed Frank Farrell, who's somewhere in here, when he was with San Joaquin County, I'm sorry, Stanislaus County, and George Lowry, who was with Merced County, and informed the Barstow family about the epidemic as far as waste tires and the stockpile of tires. So the Barstow family jumped into the tire recycling business, and around 1997, we initially started out by collecting tires, grinding them up into large chunks, and then actually sending them to the Forward landfill over in here in San Joaquin County. As we progressed in the industry, we started producing a 2-inch tire chip that we sold to Air Products, which is also in Stockton, and we sold about up to 8,000 tons to Air Products annually. That represented approximately 25% of our volume. What we also had to do is develop new products, develop uses for waste tires. So Golden purchased tire recycling equipment and started establishing and developing a landscape mulch business. Golden currently produces up to 12 to 14 million pounds of landscape mulch annually that's used in playgrounds, in schools and parks. And that's a large outlet for us to use process recycle waste tires. Golden then also got into the crumb rubber business. Crumb rubber has multiple applications. In California, crumb rubber is primarily used in the rubberized asphalt concrete business, Caltrans being the largest utilizer of asphalt rubber. You also seen crumb rubber being utilized in field turfs. You see a big migration over the last 10 years to put in the field turfs at a lot of the high schools and universities, which allows for to maintain that field and develop a longer life expectancy of that field. There are many applications from crumb rubber, and we're just touching the surfaces for crumb rubber. One of the biggest growth opportunities that I see in the future is really for molded and extruded products, and taking and blending crumb rubber with plastics to develop low-cost, sustainable products that have beneficial use within our communities. Here's a chart that kind of documents the tire flow a little bit, and I actually hijacked a couple of these graphs from SAIC. It is a consulting company that actually Cal Recycle utilizes to document the tire market, waste tire market. And so here in this slide, this identifies approximately, it identifies the users of waste tires. And ultimately, the tire starts with the consumers who go to a tire shop or what we call a tire generator, and they swap out their tires. And there's approximately 27,000 tire generators in the state. And those tires then will go to processing facilities. Sometimes a processing facility like ours will go collect the tires directly from the generator. Sometimes they'll contract a hauler, and a permitted hauler will go pick up the tires and bring them to an in-use facility. Sometimes tires are sent to tire shops that retread tires, especially when you have truck tires. Truck tire can be retread, I believe, 3 times. When tires are sent to processors like mine, we take and we process that tire, grind it down, and produce good, sustainable products that have utility out in the marketplace. Not all tires, though, however, end up at a processing facility like ours. You see, especially over the last handful of years, a strong demand for internationally for waste tires. And what typically happens is a waste tire will be collected by sometimes a permitted hauler, sometimes an unpermitted hauler, taken to a facility that's typically unpermitted, and they'll get baled and loaded into a cargo container and sent overseas. Typically, as Brian alluded to, those containers end up in Vietnam, China, India. A lot of what we've seen is a lot of those tires end up ultimately in China, where Brian did a fantastic job of outlining the pollution that's generated from the burning of those tires. We've seen that dramatically impact our tire flow. Golden at one point in time collected anywhere between 4 and 5 million tires, and as a result of these baling operations and unpermitted operations that go and collect the tires, we've seen our tire flow drop about 30%, which has, at this point in time, now we're trying to fight for tires to put into good, beneficial, sustainable products that have utility out in our local community. some of the key trends that I allude to a little bit is waste tire generation as a whole is down slightly over the last few years. You've seen people are holding on to their tires, running their tires a little longer because of the poor economy. Sometimes you see people going and collecting tires and trying to reuse those tires. So you've seen a lot more used tire sales than what historically has been the case. So as a whole, there's increased competition for waste tires, and it's caused great supply and revenue disruption to our business and pretty much most permitted tire processors. You know, where there was typically a lot of tires that went to the landfill, that number has diminished dramatically. And there's a strong need for stronger enforcement regulations and standards, but that can't be done currently without additional legislative changes, which is in process. And you know, people like Nick Lapis, who's here with CAW, who's really pushing AB 1647, will hopefully assist with the legislative changes, and once implemented, allowing to crack down on unpermitted operations, or essentially illegal operations. So that's something that we definitely welcome and are actively assisting with, and wherever we can help. But that's a growing trend. There's also great competition for crumb rubber, which is has many applications in the California marketplace. That's coming from either out of state or out of country, and you know, it's always disheartening for me when I see crumb rubber being used to pave roads like 99 and I-5 here. That the crumb rubber comes from out of state, and it's disheartening to see how California tires aren't being utilized to necessarily pave all of our roads. So here is a trend that kind of documents tire diversion over time. You can see that the bars represent the number of waste tires, which runs about between 40 and 45 million tires annually. It's basically a tire per person in the state. And the green represents tires that are diverted, and the brown on the below represents tires that are going to the landfill. And you see that obviously the landfill tires have diminished dramatically, and the diversion rate has increased up to approximately 90%, which is great, except for you want to analyze and understand where those tires are being diverted to. Are they going into good, sustainable, recycled products, or are they going and getting burned and creating pollution that we and our children and our families breathe every day? And that's why I always like it when Brian speaks before me, because he always plugs up the air pollution charts, and it really lends itself to the waste tire business as well. And it's one of the reasons why anybody that's if you're producing TDF or you're producing baled tires that are going to go get burned, we feel you have a responsibility to do your due diligence to make sure that where are they getting burned, what type of equipment and emission standards does that company have? Do they have low emissions boilers that they're burning the tire chips or tires into? So we feel that there's a social obligation that a tire processor has in this business. The next slide here kind of documents some of the uses of waste tires. The bottom is the disposal, which you can see has dropped dramatically. And most of the other categories, year over year, with different colors, are flat with the exception of the yellow, and that's the export market that I've alluded to. And current California export market indicates that what once was roughly a 5 to 7% of the waste tires got exported is now up to close to 25%, and you know, so that's 25% of California's tires that are going overseas. It's 25% of the tires that could be utilized to develop sustainable products that are manufactured in California that are no longer here. And what that does is it drives increased competition to go collect those tires. The tire business is such that I charge a fee to go collect tires from different shops. That tire shop charges the consumer a fee to dispose of the tire. So in theory, the tire shop doesn't have, you know, tire shop can push off that fee to the consumer. But what we're finding is that some tire shops are electing to not, they don't necessarily care where the tire goes as long as they are not held responsible for it. So tire generators might have a unpermitted hauler or unpermitted tire operation facility come in and solicit their tires for a fraction of what a permitted company might charge, and so you're seeing a lot of pressure on the revenue side and the tire supply. So it's very disheartening to see from our perspective. One of the, I think, the key factors that has dictated the economics of the exportation of waste tires has to do with the price of coal. Recently, SAIC, which is partnered with CalRecycle, did a study, and they identified that as the coal price has increased over the last few years, so has the exportation of waste tires, because those tires are being obtained for their BTU value. And as long as coal prices remain high, this will always be a challenge for waste tires being exported and used for their BTU value. So the challenge for the business is, how do we continue to develop products that have a good use for the community, that presents itself a good economic value to the consumer. So one of the things that we can do is, again, develop new products. And so here's a picture of baled tires at a facility, and there's, you know, thousands of tires at some of these facilities that they get offload a truck and they go through a baler, they get baled and exported out. So what things can we do to change the dynamics of the waste tire industry? I'm just going to kind of skip forward a little bit. CalRecycles currently, who governs the waste tire business, is looking at different ways to try to keep tires inside California, and they're evaluating an incentive-based system. And there's lots of ideas as far as incentivizing chrome rubber, mold and extrude products. The state is going to has a timeline, though, to develop this incentive plan, because in 2015 the tire fund that's collected from the consumer is going to drop from $1.75 a tire down to 75 cents a tire, and that means there's going to be less dollars to utilize as far as research and development and different market development, tire enforcement. So this problem could get actually even worse if something isn't done quickly in the next couple of years. There are a few things that CalRecycle, along with Californians Against Waste, are pushing with legislation. One of those is AB 1647, which is cracking down on unpermitted haulers in-use facilities, and reducing the timeline, the due process timeline with which CalRecycle has to stop and actually effectively shut the door on illegal operations. to me, one of the bigger issues, it comes down to public awareness of where our tires go as consumers, and what changes, how do we change the consumer's mindset to their spending habits. As a consumer, you just go to the tire shop and you get a quote for new tires, and typically, based on the type of tire you want, you pick the best quote. But at the end of the day, ultimately, what we want you to do is ask that tire generator, that tire shop, what happens to my tires after you guys take them off my car or my vehicle? Where do they go? What are they used for? And we would rather see consumers change their spending habits based off of what that tire shop, what they do with that tire, and push tire shops to have a social obligation and responsibility to try to, again, promote the recycling of these products into sustainable end products that have good utility in our community. And you can do that through incentives, through tax credits, through equipment grants potentially. But the biggest thing is, I think, a broad-based marketing campaign to buy California and buy local products. And to piggyback that on with, again, investing in R&D, investing, whether it be incentives, tax credits, that help identify and develop new uses for chrome rubber, or processed waste tires. So I think that's the growth, the future of the waste tire business. And Golden actively works with and tries to partner with Cal Recycle to see what we can do to help push that in the future. So that's all I've got, and I appreciate you guys' time and allowing me to speak to you and hopefully educate you a little bit on the waste tire business. Thank you.
How we doing out there? Everyone okay? Yeah? Ready for lunch? Promise I won't take too long. My name's Frank Savetovac, and I represent Epic Plastics. We are a processor and manufacturer of recycled HDPE bottles. Like the gentleman before me, I'll talk a little bit about who we are, what it is we do, and then get into where I think we're headed and some of the steps we can take to really push this sustainability movement that we're all here to support. The clicker, did I lose it? Here we go. So Epic Plastics is part of a large conglomerate of companies that you may or may not be familiar with. Pacific Coast Building Products is our parent company. We started as one single lumber yard in downtown Sacramento. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it was called Anderson Lumber. That was in 1953, and since then we've grown to over 95 different profit centers in the western U.S. and Canada. One of those being one of those Southern California paper mills that you talked about. The other one of the other ones obviously being Epic Plastics. We also have supply yards for building contractors. We have a ton of concrete manufacturers, pavers, blocks, clay bricks, all that kind of stuff. All of our companies incorporate recycled materials products and sustainable services. Epic Plastics specifically, who are we? Well, we are actually the originators of the bend-to-board recycled landscape edging. The business started in 1995 in Richmond, California, and really the way we came up with our idea was we started with plastic pallets. The recycled plastic pallets were very heavy, very expensive in comparison to recycled wood pallets. We hooked up with a landscape contractor that said he needed edging for mow strip and tree rings and stuff like that. Turns out we decided we could do it. We are actually the only manufacturer that's vertically integrated. That means we process the bottles that we buy. The way that works is you folks put your laundry detergent bottles, your shampoo bottles, your milk jugs in your recycling bins. Those get collected by a MRF or somebody like American Recycling. They take them back to their facility, they sort them. We in turn buy them before they go export or even to California landfills. We sort them, size them, wash them ourselves, and then make our plastic landscape edging. We were purchased by Pacific Coast in 2007, and we fall under that Baselite LLC, which is really our outdoor living products group. Closing the loop. So this is a real telling slide. On the picture on the left, what that is that's a number 2 HDPE bottle bale. It's about 1,200 pounds, or about 12,000 individual plastic bottles. Once again, those come straight from a material recovery facility. We bring them to our yard, sort them, size them, wash them, and make that picture on the right. That's our landscape edging. Very proud to say that we're upwards of 155 million, 144 million it says here. This is an older slide, but we're at about 150 million bottles purchased, diverted, and consumed annually, which converts into 15 million pounds. And that is our main feedstock for our 11 miles of bend board that we produce on a daily basis. What's our product mix? Once again, it's primarily landscape edging. About 95% of our business is this edging. That being said, we do have different products, different materials mixes that serve different purposes in different markets. Our bend board on the right is 100% post-consumer plastics. It's got a natural wood grain finish, several profiles. The Epic Edge, on the other hand, is infused with about 40% wood flour. Now, that's also 100% post-consumer recycled. The wood flour is wooden pallets, wooden packaging, crates, some of that other stuff. What that does is that's infused to densify our board. Those familiar with plastic products know that inherently plastic expands and contracts depending on if it's exposed to heat or to cold. So when we get into climates like a desert or like up in Tahoe with freeze-thaw conditions, we need a more dynamic product that makes for a more foolproof installation. What are the uses? Like we mentioned, mow strip, rock garden definition, pathway borders. Those are the most common, and those are aesthetic uses. Our taller profiles are also used for weed prevention, depending on what type of turf you're using, or even concrete forming and other things to create organic definitions in your landscape. Concrete is obviously a very bland and cheap resource to build a hardscape with. Our product can definitely be used to dress that up and make some organic shapes for your patio or for whatever your hardscape needs. Our product versus steel edge. Now, in California, we've done a really good job. We probably got about 85% of the market share in California. That translates into about 5 or 10% nationally. And the main competitor are the steel edging solutions. So when we go into other markets, what's our sales pitch? What's our story to promote these plastics recycled products? The first thing is obviously the fact that we're vertically integrated, that we're diverting waste from landfills, that we're doing all our own processing, and then we're making a product that's eco-friendly. In comparison, the steel edging is all virgin materials. Very few of, if any, of those steel manufacturers use recycled or reprocessed steel. the the second pitch, or the second benefit that we communicate is the fact that we're cost competitive. The biggest barrier to recycled materials feedstock products is the fact that they cost more money to make. There's collection involved, there's processing involved, and then of course you have your manufacturing. We, with the help of folks like Cal Recycle, have been very fortunate to keep our processing and manufacturing costs down so we can compete with these virgin resin products. The third and final sales point is to us, very obviously, safety. Steel rots, it decays, it rusts. If you're doing any kind of municipal project, if you're doing a public park or a school system or a pathway on a border or even a boardwalk or something like that, a decomposed granite boardwalk, you know that liability is always a question, always an issue. With our product, there's zero liability. Obviously, with steel edging, there's the obvious liability of cuts, scrapes, all kinds of issues. How do we make this happen? How do we make this happen? Like I said, manufacturing, processing of recycled materials is extremely expensive, extremely cumbersome. We've done it through partnerships. All of us have, I'm sure, been watching these presidential campaigns, and our president most famously said a couple weeks ago that if you built a business, you weren't on your own. You got help along the way from somebody, somewhere, somehow. We are no exception to that rule. In 2005, we received a grant from Cal Recycle, was worth over $1 million. What it did was update our sorting and processing operation. If you can remember that first picture I showed of the bale coming in, 1,200-pound bale, in order to meet our manufacturing demand, we got to go through about 30 to 40 of those a day. Once again, an extremely cumbersome process. That first grant in 2005 from California Recycle allowed us to purchase and install new conveyors, new sorters, optical sorters that not only pulled the metal out of our stream, but also separated our natural bottles from our pigmented bottles. The reason why that's so important is the natural bottles bear more value in the open market, the color bottles a little bit less. So if we can sort those, we can mix and match and put in as much of either one as we want, depending on what's available in the market, what's priced favorably in the market. Once again, very important steps in terms of staying competitive with virgin resin products. 2008, we received another grant to the tune of about $750,000, and this is to expand that processing operation. The first go-around was extremely successful. We were able to separate our materials the way we wanted to in order to support our manufacturing. What we realized is now that we've created demand in the marketplace, we have a reason to expand our capacity. This second grant pending will do that. The third and I don't want to say most important, but definitely the most lucrative and the most valuable to a business operator, a business professional, is this plastic market development payment. In my opinion, this payment should be the flagship program for everything that we do. If we do something for the tire group or the glass group or the paper group, this program is a slam dunk. First and foremost, doesn't take any money from tax revenues. This is all internally funded, but from the CRV program. The way it works is it's extremely efficient, extremely streamlined. We get or we buy however many hundreds of tons on a quarterly basis. We turn in those invoices from the MRFs to Cal Recycle. In turn, we get a rebate check based on a percentage. Now, the value here is not only in the monetary value of the rebate payment, but also in the fact that it's extremely liquid. It is a cash payment back in our pocket that we can decide what to do with. Why is that important? Well, the grant monies are great. The grant monies are fantastic. We've been successful on two ends of those. The reason why we were successful is because we recognized a need in the marketplace. We knew we needed equipment that we didn't have the capital to buy, and we were able to capitalize on that with the help of those grant programs. What this plastic market development payment does, like I said, it puts the cash in our pocket. So if there is no demand, I can use that money to go create the demand. I can get on a plane, use it towards marketing, advertising, procurement, whatever the case might be. Wherever I can spend that money most effectively on that day that the check's cut is up to me, to do. In turn, we grow our business. Obviously, that's the main goal here. It's not going in anybody's pocket and they're running to the bank with it. We're putting this money back in the system. In turn, we grow our business. We consume more bottles in California. And that's the goal that obviously we're all working towards. So without trying to sound too repetitive here, because it's obviously been a common theme throughout the day, is how do we keep these materials in California? Ultimately, how do we keep these jobs and this revenue stream in California? As these guys have mentioned, we talked about anywhere from 30 to 95% of our resources going overseas, specifically to China. In terms of the bottle program, my research has told me that it's about 85% of the post-consumer bottles, and that obviously varies whether you mix in paper or rubber or glass or whatever else, but specifically to bottles, we're looking at about 85% going overseas, primarily to China. First and foremost, how do they do that? Several reasons. One, like our government, their government subsidizes them, gives them a whole lot of buying power. They have a weaker currency, and they have a cheaper labor force, less regulation. All increase their buying power. Ultimately, what happens, like we said before, processing jobs, materials go overseas, and we lose that revenue stream. Not more importantly, but as important is what we talked about earlier as well, the carbon footprint. And in terms of the materials just going overseas, there's a huge increase in carbon dioxide emissions. Not to mention that fact that those materials, a lot of those materials that can't be used are just simply being burned. So what does the supply chain look like? California buys packaging, apparel, toys, other low-priced goods from China. They ship those materials to us via cargo ship on containers. We empty those containers, stock our shelves with their products, and the cycle repeats itself. Well, one thing that's missing is the fact that those containers sit empty on our ports. On the coast of California, those containers sit empty until we can fill them with something to send back. Obviously, we're not manufacturing goods here to send back to China. If we were, this wouldn't be a concern. The main reason why these resources are going overseas is because they need to get those containers back. Just to give you an example, the low demand, that spread between our imports and exports yields a cost of one container going from California to China with materials with our resources in it costs roughly about $700. To ship that same container from Sacramento to LA costs us $1,000. And you're talking about a difference of 6,000 miles there. 6,500 miles is the difference there, and they're getting a $300 per container discount. Very, very extremely inefficient supply chain. Moving forward, what does that look like? Without getting into detailed CO2 calculations, what we're looking at is, once again, the California MRF to California processor to California manufacturer to California consumer yields about 1,000 miles in transit, round trip. The California MRF to an export processor, also to an export manufacturer, back to the California consumer, yields more than 14,000 miles in transit. Now remember, if we keep it in California, we're moving that stuff on trucks. If we send that stuff to China, we're moving it on cargo ships. Cargo ships run much richer, much more oily fuels than our trucks here. According to gas2go.org, it's estimated on an annual basis that one cargo ship emits as much CO2 into the atmosphere as 50 million ground vehicles. So not only are they burning, not only are we exporting jobs, we're exporting resources, we're burning resources, and we're emitting gases, getting all this done. So once again, extremely, extremely inefficient supply chain economics. So the last slide here, so we can all get a bite to eat and relax a little bit. I put up 4 very general statements. Not only are they general statements, they're very ambitious statements. And the reason why I do that, it's not to start a rallying cry or anything like that, but just kind of to put in perspective where we're at and where we're headed and what's going on. We mentioned the carbon footprint. We mentioned the loss of jobs. All these things have a negative impact on our local economy here. So what do we do to fix that? The first step, and this has already been done several times over, is to pass legislature that supports recyclables processing manufacturing in California. How we do that is through programs like Cal Recycle supports. Those are extremely important because they keep us procurement competitive and also processing and manufacturing competitive. China, India, these are all very important partners to us. We don't want to just shut the door on them. That can have extreme adverse effects, but we do want to stay competitive. High prices, competitive prices, competitive demand are all good things for economies. So we want to keep them as a partner, but we got to figure out a way to make ourselves competitive. The second thing, which hasn't been really done yet, and is probably a little tricky, is to reward distributors, retailers, service providers for either putting these products on their shelves or using their services or using these products for their services. You stay at a hotel like the Hilton here, and they'll put their little sign on the pillow, you know, if you don't need your towels washed, let us know, or if you don't need your sheets changed, let us know. There should be some sort of reward, some sort of competitive advantage for offering those solutions. Wholesale distributors, retailers, how do we get our recycled contact goods on their shelves? Their obligation is make turns. Make turns, have a low profit, and turn it over as many times as you can. Let's get products on the shelves, let's move them out the door the next day, and let's do it effectively. Well, how do we incentivize them, or how do we persuade them to put our recycled manufactured goods? They have to be cost competitive, they have to have added benefits, there's got to be a value proposition there, but we can also use our story. We can also use our sustainability movement goals to support those efforts. As consumers, what can we do? We buy the products. Know what you're buying. You know, we talked about when you go get your tires swapped out, find out where they're going. You know, are they getting burned in Indonesia, or are they going to a local processor to be made into playground bark or whatever else the case may be. And most importantly, and I see some young kids here, we got to get the generation that's in school right now. We got to get these folks on board, or else all our efforts are for naught. Because there's going to be a time when everyone in this room runs out of steam, and you need someone to pass the baton to. You know, this movement, the sustainability movement, is still in its infancy, and that's hard for people to understand, especially those that have been working on it for 10, 20, 30 years. but it's still very young. And we have to take a long-term approach, and we have to build the infrastructure. And building infrastructure, as we now know, goes far beyond collection. We not only have to collect these materials, we have to find a place to process them locally, and we gotta find a place to consume them locally. And the support of the youth, just based on the consumer demand that they generate, is so important. Is so important. I could talk all day. I'm going to shut it down because I can hear some bellies grumbling. So if there's no questions, I'll turn it back to Ms. Eggman.
We want to really thank all our speakers. And, well, you know, I think that the picture that can be painted is daunting and dim about the work that needs to be done. And I'm not a cheerleader type. I played third base. I take the line drives. But I also just want to say that we really thank these guys for being the pioneers who, despite kind of the hardship and some of the darkness that they can see on the future, they are doing the work every single day and have successful, important businesses that are really showing the way, I think, for the future. So just another round of applause for just doing the actual work. Like many of you, I had the opportunity to travel some, and I was talking with someone who serves in the state legislature in Wyoming, and they're a very part-time legislature, and I asked how many people are there again, and it's like 400,000. So which is just about the size of San Joaquin County as a whole state. So it makes sense that we start this kind of revolution of how to do the closing the loop on businesses right here in the state, because we're the biggest, we create the most trash, so let's put it to work for jobs. So anyway, so we have a couple minutes for questions, and then we're going to have lunch is going to come in, and then while you're eating, I'm going to let the front people go first because our speaker's going to eat really fast, so then she can speak. And then our last panel will start at 1 to get you out of here at 2 o'clock. So any questions for our very fine speakers? And Phil Donahue has got his microphone, and he'll be prepared to run around. Questions?
Hi, I have a comment. You guys all gave very good talks and made some points about different products. I could take any of your PowerPoint presentations and insert electronics recycling into it and have pretty much the same story to tell. And Cal Recycle has done a variety of things with different products. The plastic remarketing, whatever that's called, CRV, the e-waste fund for covered electronic waste. But I think what's clear is that we need to look at a bigger picture solution, not one product at a time. But how can we in California try to keep recycling of any product in the state? Because you're telling the same story on different products. And why are we spending time individually on products and money individually on different products rather than take a bigger picture approach and put together some sort of framework for recycling that encourages recycling of anything, be it a wine bottle, styrofoam, tires, electronics, and encourage that to keep happening in the state, because it's the same story on different products.
Good. Yeah, and I think our last panel will address some of those concrete ideas that we can try to do that comprehensive change. But that's an excellent point. Other questions, comments?
We got one more back here.
What is the fine for shipping tires to China to be burnt there?
As far as shipping tires, it really depends. Once the tires go into a cargo container, as long as they're a permitted hauler that's taking the tires to the port, there is no fine. If they are unpermitted, then I believe that Cal Recycle has a streamlined fine process or penalty process, and the first fine is $500. I believe part of AB 1647 would assist with more severe penalties for secondary and third violations, which could result up to loss of vehicle registration for up to 3 years. So that's something we definitely advocate, and because a lot of times when you're moving baled tires and they get put on the cargo or on the container, typically those containers weigh more than 80,000 pounds, which is the maximum gross vehicle weight for the state of California. So what you're having is trucks going down the road at 92,000 pounds for some of these companies that are trying to pack as many tires as they can in the containers. And typically, I get a call. I probably get calls 3, 4, 5 a week asking, do we sell scrap tires? Do we sell baled tires? And every time they can you, or I'll get an email. They'll solicit through our website, and it's can you put 26 metric tons on the container? Well, first of all, my response is we're not a baling tire business. We don't bale tires. We sell crumb rubber and rubber landscape mulch. But the other immediate, the thing that draws my attention from the onset is when they start asking you, when the request comes asking you to load the container above the 80,000 pound gross vehicle weight. So immediately it goes delete right into the garbage, or I won't even entertain calling and finding out information unless I'm going to do it from as a lead for an enforcement action. That and Golden Byproducts partners with CalRecycle as far as when we find out information, we turn it over to CalRecycle, let them follow up on the lead. So.
And I think Frank is telling me to cut it off. But just one final comment. Just looking around the room, and it's political season, which is like my Super Bowl and World Series all rolled into one, watching all the conventions. I would just guess, just because it's a chamber event, that we probably have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans in the room. And I would also say that we all agree on this one thing, right? So that's, I think, the beauty of these kinds of coalitions coming together, that people can come from with different kinds of interest, but they come together to find things that really make sense, that we can agree on and move our state forward. So that's my political thing. All right, so we're going to, the lunch, are they bringing it in, Frank? Is it coming in? Buffet. All right, so we're going to start with this first line here. So you Red Jacket students, you get A's because you start us off, and if you march on out that door, and then the rest of the tables will just follow on, and then bring your food, come back, because then we're going to hear from Carol Mortensen, CalRecycle, the agency that's doing the good work. Thank you very much. Okay, is everybody enjoying your lunch? Good, good, good. All right. So we're going to get restarted. We're going to recycle, get going. But first, I'd like to, I think he's still here, introduce President and CEO of the Greater Stockton Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Douglas Wilhoit. And also the Chamber's current board president, Gary Long. Okay, now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Carol Mortensen, who is a Cal director, CalCycle director. Carol was appointed Cal Recycle director by Governor Jerry Brown in October 2011. As director, Ms. Mortensen leads efforts on waste reduction and recycling, as well as oversight of waste disposal in order to protect public health and the environment. Ms. Mortensen has an extensive background in the development of environmental policy and legislation. She most recently served as consultant for the State Senate Committee on Environmental Quality, where she analyzed legislation and provided policy guidance related to solid and hazardous waste and air and water quality. As chief consultant for the State Assembly Committee on Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials from 2005 to 2007, Ms. Mortensen worked on issues related to hazardous waste, green chemistry, pesticides, brownfields, and other related policy areas. Prior to her work in the Capitol, Ms. Mortensen previously spent 13 years at the former California Integrated Waste Management Board, working in a wide variety of positions within the board and later as a member of the executive team as legislative director. And as a professor of social work at Sac State, I am proud to say Ms. Mortensen earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Science from the great California State University, Sacramento. Let's give her a big round of applause.
Quite know how to follow that now. I feel like I should just stand here and look directorial of some sort, but nope, you guys are stuck with listening because I have some stuff to say. So thank you, Mr. Board President and past President, for asking me back. I was joking with Frank because sometimes I get asked once someplace and don't get asked to come back again, so this is a real treat. And thanks to Mr. Frank Farrell for putting together an outstanding agenda today. I think you heard a great amount of very valuable, truthful, and timely information from our panel this morning about the state of recycling materials in California right now. So we're going to cover a little bit more. I'm going to reaffirm what a lot of those guys said this morning. I'm going to give some perspective on what we're working on at my department, a little bit about what we're doing in partnership with other state agencies, and then leave you with some thoughts on ideas going forward. So let's get moving. This is my very first PowerPoint too. I've been speaking off the cuff for almost a year now, but my staff is saying I need to get with the 20th century. I did it. Okay. So we're going to start a little bit talking about what you guys heard from this morning that was very eloquently pushed. I don't need to say it anymore, was the whole GHG approach to looking at recycling. What we're working on AB 341, which is a bill that I was analyzing when I was with the Senate, and now I have the pleasure of implementing. Where that's leaving us, kind of the challenge or the lift of what we're going to need to do to accomplish and reach that 75% goal. Where we are with the current state of infrastructure, and that's not necessarily good news, but we have hope. And then what do we need, tools and policies needed for more job creation. And thank gosh for the BIN Coalition. This is such an interesting group of folks that has come together as, kind of got themselves going around the mandatory commercial recycling regulations that started with the Air Resources Board, and we got to finish up. And it is such a wonderful partnership with the same goal of working to create jobs and improve the economy via increasing recycling infrastructure in California. And it's a great group of folks from our California Recycling Market Development Zone coordinators and the Product Stewardship Council, the Stockton Chamber of Commerce, the CRC, CRRA. It's just been a really great coalition that's growing and growing and growing. So AB 341 is the 75% recycling goal set for the state. This is a bill that Assemblymember Chesbrough worked on last year and the governor signed. And it is two parts. It had the mandatory commercial recycling requirements that we started through regulation and now are memorialized in statute. But the other part that was really exciting to me was the 75% recycling goal. And it calls for my department to look at what we're doing and look to the future about what we're going to need to get us to that goal. It's been, set up specifically in statute to talk about source reduction, recycling, and composting, including anaerobic digestion. Doesn't talk about transformation or other types of disposal. And the one thing we need to get there is the recycling manufacturing to get there. It's going to be a lift. But we did our first cut of a draft plan and some ideas that we rolled out, and rolled that out in the summer. And it was about a 62-page document with all kinds of different ideas, including funding mechanisms and infrastructure ideas. I'll have to say the comments we got back, I was less than happy with. People tend to gravitate toward two things. One was the other 25%, what are we going to do about waste to energy issues? And the other part was don't mess with the status quo. And a lot of that came from our partners in local government who were very afraid of this 75% state goal becoming a 75% diversion mandate on them, and that it was a challenge for them to meet what we've got. And so it was kind of a wake-up call for me and my staff, and we're going to have to really kind of come back at it in a different way. And maybe it was poor messaging on my part, or it was just the state of local government infrastructure right now, and what we're asking them to do so much with not many resources. But we're going to get through it. It's going to be a challenge. There was, like I said, about a 62-page document. There was 58 pages of really good stuff that I'm not going to let go by, and that includes a lot of things like recycled content, incentives, getting the state to do more to its mandate to buy recycled, working with local governments and local decision makers on siting and permitting issues to encourage these types of manufacturing and recycling facilities to be built. So I am daunted, but I am going to continue on. So thank you. I was telling my table right before I came up about how contagious a group like this is. And sometimes you get a little bit down on your day-to-day job, but you come in and see the energy in this group and the diverse number of people, but everybody having the same goal. So I have to thank you for that. So what we're seeing as kind of the big benefits for 75% recycling is, expanded manufacturing, which gets us the jobs and the infrastructure here in California, the new jobs aspect, which is so critical to the health of our economy, the GHG benefits, the 11 million tons of I can never get this right, but it's a lot of really good carbon dioxide reduction benefits. So that's kind of the basic premise for us going forward. And then while we're here today, jobs. Just some quick numbers for you. Green jobs are growing at 3% of the California's total employment. We can do better. Recycling creates 4 to 11 times more jobs than collection and landfilling. In the past 15 years, we've averaged 3 times the growth from all other jobs. And by big theme here is by redirecting recycling exports back to California process and manufacture, we can create tens of thousands of jobs in California. And there was a question earlier today for Javier about the people think green jobs. I think automatically people go to solar and energy and that type of thing. But this type of stuff we're not that. We've got a lot of it in place. It's not a lot of new development. We just have to expand what we have. So we're ready to go compared to a lot of other industries. So here's kind of the lift. This is our 2020 recyclables tonnage estimates. And the blue line there that's kind of what we're already moving away. Then we have the other side, which is the green's about the other 22 million tons that we're going to have to process. And then the 21 million tons is what we'd like to get to, but that represents the 25% that's left over if we reach the 75% recycling goal. So this is kind of our lift, or what we need to move and find homes for. So when you look at that percentage, or that pie, this is what we're looking at. A huge chunk of inerts, a lot of organics. This really isn't that surprising. Food, organics, and grain waste are one of our biggest challenges, and I think those are some of the things that I'll talk about a little bit about our cornerstones for getting infrastructure built. Because if we can get those places that handle that material sited and operating, that's going to be a huge lift and a good model. So what we're looking at here is what's left, the stuff that's getting disposed but still has recyclable materials in it. So again, a lot of inerts, and then there's the compostable product again. That's our green waste and our organics that we're going to be targeting. And the 15% is kind of the existing, what we traditionally think of recyclables, meaning the fibers and the plastics. So again, I mentioned a little bit about organics. Right now, we've got about, again, this data is from about 2008, 2009. We've got about 115 facilities with a capacity of 5.8 million tons. We have a few anaerobic digestion or embryonic facilities, but we need to be able to double that infrastructure to reach our 75% goal. So general recycling infrastructure, we've got about 140 sort and recovery types of operations that remove mixed recyclables. We have about 420 processed sorted recycled materials to add value and create feedstock. About 150 manufacturers for finished products using recycling materials, and about 40 that create fuels to energy. What's not on the side of what's comparable to the 150 number is the number of active landfills in California. So that ratio is a little out of whack. We got to work on that. So like I said, looks pretty good, but we got a lot more material to handle. We do have some existing capacity, a smidge that'll get us a little bit closer. It's about 5 million tons of capacity that isn't being utilized, but that's still going to be, a 15 to 17 million ton gap. And this is, I'm a little bit embarrassed. All my industry guys did such a good job describing this. But here's what we've been looking at as far as exports. And funny, we exported about 22 million tons of recyclable from our ports last year, and that's about the same amount of material I need to process to reach the 75% goal. Again, a huge industry, $9.4 billion of the value of that material is going overseas. And this is where it gets a little tricky, is data on exports is a little challenging, especially for California, because we have so many ports here, is to be able to distinguish what's California generated versus stuff that's coming through. But we're guessing about, of the stuff exported, 6 to 8% of stuff that was generated right here. And that's a really telling figure. And I think my guys this morning, you guys heard from them, is that they can account to this. We've quadrupled the amount of our exports in the last 10 years. So that goes to, lots of things, is what we're, the growth of our world markets are growing, and how are we going to compete with that. So this is really tiny. I apologize for this. This didn't come out very well, but kind of what we're exporting by type, and a lot of fiber, a lot of paper, a lot of plastics, and a lot of metals, which really aren't that surprising when you look at shipping containers being loaded on ships in the ports. So some of the challenges we're seeing, economics of landfilling. We are one of the least expensive states in the union for landfill disposal. Average between 70 and 150 bucks a ton. It's really difficult to overcome those. We also have some kind of perverse policies in place, like charging no tipping fee and giving diversion credit for alternative daily cover and beneficial uses in landfills that we work to overcome. Again, we hit on today also is the cross-regulatory issues. As I'm telling my table before I came up, I need facilities. I have to have facilities. My brethren, sometimes my the water board folks, the air board folks, we all have our work to do, but I need facilities to get the work done. They would rather see those facilities go because of the pollution aspects of it. So it's kind of it's a challenge, but we are working together. Secretary Rodriguez has really impressed me with his ability to get people into a room and start talking about it. But it's a challenge because, especially in this valley with air pollution issues and working with the feds on the Clean Air Act, is how do we get folks to come out of their silos a bit and recognize environmental co-benefits. It's that, yeah, we may have a point source pollution maybe from a new manufacturing facility, but if you take into account the great data we have about shipping containers halfway across the world for recycling and that we turn around and buy right back, what's the global air pollution impacts of that, and how do we quantify that type of work? And it's a challenge because it's really, really hard and it's pushing people way out of their comfort zone, but you're being heard with those messages. So thank you, because you've got good data and good examples like that sometimes I'm a little embarrassed to say that we don't have. But those are just some of the big issues that we're dealing with. The one thing a big part of my little report that people tended to overlook was working with local governments on the local siting process and conditional use permits, general plan updates. A lot of local governments are doing a lot of very innovative things, using CEQA as requirements to take into account when we do new development about what are you going to do with that waste, where is it going to go, how do we get people to buy recycled content materials when they build those developments and operate them in a sustainable way. So that's one thing I think we have a lot of room to move in, is working with our local government partners on recognizing the value these types of facilities bring. So here's our little existing toolbox. We have our recycling market development zone program, or loan program. We have low interest loans. It's based on, we use that money from our tipping fee, which, probably for non-recycling related activities, more economy related activities, is we're seeing a big decrease in disposal in this state. And the less disposal we have, the less that $1.40 a ton that comes into my coffers go down. So just when I need more money to do types of new incentives is when my funding is going down. But that doesn't deter us. We're always looking around in other people's coffers as well. And the AB 118, the clean fuel fundings, we're looking at trying to get some of that money for anaerobic digestion facilities and establishing different pathways for organics through that process. We worked on a programmatic environmental impact report for anaerobic digestion, which was a good state effort to try to help with the siting of those facilities. We've got our great RMDZ administrators at the local level that are out banging on doors trying to get folks to hear the message to site these facilities. Again, we mentioned the plastic incentive payment that was passed that by Assemblymember Gordon a couple years ago that has been very successful, and it definitely is a model for ways to pull materials through the system. And that's one thing about my program at CalRecycle, is we've got a whole bunch of different ways of doing things. We just have 2 new extended producer responsibility programs for carpet and paint that we're going to get rolling. So we've got that model. We have the bottle bill program, which has all types of different types of grants and loans and incentive payments. We have the tire program, which is great. It's a kind of a wide open funding mechanism that we get wonderful latitude to develop a 5-year plan for how we're going to spend that money, which is great. And then we have the e-waste program, which is built on more of a pulling products through the system type of model. But it would be really nice to be able to do one sort of, I heard somebody earlier ask about, wouldn't it be nice to have one sort of a framework or one way of doing things? And there's been some efforts. There was a bill a few years ago by Assemblymember Chesbrough to look at coming up with a product stewardship framework that CalRecycle could implement and look at new products that maybe something we could slide into that, but that met a quick demise, unfortunately. And we just find, too, working with different stakeholder groups, it's a challenge as people have different needs and different demands. Their markets are different. How they distribute products is different. And we're always looking for a more systematic approach. But I'm an opportunist. I will never look a good opportunity down. So sometimes you need to grab an opportunity when it presents itself and run with it. And I think sometimes I will end up with a bit of a hodgepodge. But, you know, we're working on it, learning from it, and looking for other ways to get things done. So, you know, some ideas. Some of this, like I said, was in my other part of my report that nobody looked at, but that's all right. So, you know, support for new and expanded manufacturing. I said we're looking at AB 1810 funds. We're also looking at cap and trade money like everybody else. You know, to do all types of different things. Use the experience we have with all the different models we have, doing grants and loans and incentive payments, assistance with facility compliance, about working with programs to help with the expense associated with environmental compliance for early compliance and above and beyond compliance. The cross-media regs to recognize the co-benefits, that is high on our priority list. And again, working with our partners on research and development projects. We've got a great partnership that was mentioned with UCD on a lot of anaerobic digestion and composting work. We're looking at all different types of ways to manage plastic, and lots of little projects that we're working with our partners on. Said those are other sources. And then the legislative change, I think we talked a little bit about, you know, we had AB 1647, which you might not think is a market development bill, but it's a bill by Assemblymember Gordon that was mentioned earlier about leveling the playing field for our in-state recyclers and processors of tires. So not everything that may look like an incentive bill actually is. Laying the taking care of and bringing everybody up to a higher standard for how they manage recycled materials, I think, is a benefit for everybody. But that also puts the onus on us as a state regulatory agency to make sure that the people that aren't doing their job are doing it. And that's one of the things we're in a bit of transition, is that we're so used to, especially on the tire side, is developing businesses and bringing people into the fold and getting more processors and more tire haulers. Is now we're at that infrastructure level. We probably have what we need. Now we've got to switch from encouraging mode to enforcement mode. And you know, sometimes it takes a while for us to, because we're good at that. We're the carrot agency, not the stick agency, but we can do it. And you've probably seen it a little bit more, and you'll probably see more about Carol being heavy-handed, and I can do it. So, you know, again, the overlap issue with the conflicting regulations and overlapping regulations, I think, is something that we all have to keep on the forefront. And I think you guys do such a great job of quantifying the benefits that recycled content material manufacturing has. You know, again, the stuff that I'm not as familiar with, I'd love to hear more about is, you know, we talked about the kind of the money out the door type things with incentives and loans and grants, but how about keeping more money in your pocket with working on tax credits and that type of stuff, assistance with siting, some of the things that I'm not as familiar with. I'd love to hear more about, because you know, there's lots of different things are going to take to get this accomplished. So I'm open to all ideas. You know, I met Javier. He and I hadn't had a chance to introduce ourselves. So the right hand and the left hand, we shook hands, which is great. And we also, GoBiz this morning, the Governor's Office of Business Development just announced today in a press release that they have fully got that place up and running. They announced about 6 or 7 different appointments that have been that were made. So that office is up and running, which is great. We're working closely with them on that, so we're excited about that. So, you you know, I wish I had more great new things to report to you. And it was close to a year ago. It was October 29th when Frank and I were sitting in a big conference room talking about, you know, what the state can do on its part on buying recycled content materials. And he said this is going to be, we're going to have a busy couple years. And I think it's starting to come together. I think we've got the energy. We've got new blood that hopefully will be infusing the legislature. It's one thing with term limits. It's a real challenge, especially for getting our word out sometimes is a little bit obscure and people aren't quite sure what to make of us, especially when we all come together, both, you know, folks you would think of as Democrats and Republicans, that we all come together under an organization like Recycle Bin. People are like, what's going on there? And intrigues them. And so I think you know, that would be good, especially if we're talking about things with incentives, with you know, adding more containers to the bottle bill or increasing the tire fee. At the state level, the passage of Proposition 26, and we need a 2/3 vote of the legislature to make that happen. And that can be incredibly challenging. But when I think there's projects such that we're working on together, if there's a kind of a consensus that this is something that would help business and make an investment in our infrastructure and California's future, I think we can get there. So thank you very much for having me. I'd love to answer a couple questions if anybody's inclined. And if you guys don't mind, if you could introduce yourself so I get a little better idea about who you are. And
Good afternoon. I am William Winchester, Vice President of Sales for Berg Mill Supply. We are in the brokerage and consulting business for the recycling industry. One question I had for you out of your presentation is that it seems to me there's two different focuses. One would be creating jobs by stopping the flow of materials out of California. And the second would be the diverting of the other 22 million tons. And it seems to me they're almost separate, not conjoined goals, because all the composting and other things are going to be lower job producing kind of investments. And to create jobs and stop the flow, we're going to be taking material that's already being recycled and just try to keep it here. So if I'm hearing you right, you have more of a focus on the diversion goal than the job creating, if you had to rank them and the way you're going to prioritize them. Is that right?
No, to me they are co-importance. Because that's, you know, we're always going to have an obligation, and because the way world trade works is we're always going to have a level of material that's going to be going out of country, and that's just the way the market is, the way the European and Asian markets are. They don't have the natural resources that we do, and there's going to be the exchange. But we need to take into account the amount of materials that India is going to be generating itself. They're growing rapidly. They're going to have their own waste materials, the same for the Pacific Rim. But I see the two things very closely together. Is a lot of these are going to require both on, you know, keeping the stuff here as well as for getting the extra 25% is because it's going to mean getting infrastructure built in California for both those things, recovering, processing, and manufacturing. So to me, I can't have one without the other. And you know, hopefully they may bounce a little bit, but I think they have to go together. So I'm sorry if I made the impression that one was more important than the other, but again, opportunity, what's in front of me will probably, you know, what opportunities are out there will probably help us follow what, you know, good ideas you guys are coming up with. So, good question, though. Oh, he's got it.
Arthur Boone from the Sierra Club of the Bay Chapter of the Sierra Club, and last night our committee had prepared some resolutions for a statewide consideration at a meeting in November. And there were two things that came up. Well, one was the possibility of increasing landfill fees basically dramatically. European Union has a $20 to $40 a ton surcharge on landfills, which pays for a lot of the things that go on there. We thought that was really important, and we thought that we would want the Sierra Club of California to take a stand in favor of that. Second thing we've been concerned about is that by our estimate, around $2 billion a year flows to local governments through their franchise fees to waste haulers. And we would like the legislature to tell your agency to study that, to see if that has a negative or a deleterious effect upon removing additional materials. And so those are the things that are sort of coming along out of what we hope is a progressive organization. We're also concerned about the interest in MRFs, and a number of us have worked in source-separated programs, running pickup trucks, and not shopping carts yet, but pickup trucks to pick up materials and to feed the independent recycling industry, which we don't see getting much of a play anywhere in the mix. There are packers in all of the big cities that move very, very large quantities of cardboard, glass, metal, all that kind of stuff. Very little of that is tracked. Very little of that is honored. Local governments tend not to know about what these people are doing, and they provide a lot of jobs, et cetera. So those are some of the issues the club is preparing to bring forth to the 75% discussion. And any comments you'd make would be appreciated.
Thank you, Art. Yeah, those are all, that's one of the interesting things in my opening. I wrote that, you know, the plan has some new stuff in it, but it actually has a lot of deja vu moments in it. And for those of us that have been around this issue for a while, some of the things that Art was talking about are things we've been talking about for quite a while. And franchise agreements is always a, you know, when you talk about making changes and what gets picked up, who gets to pick it up, local control, waste flow issues, it's that delicate balance between, again, local control, state control, good state policy, local policy, and it's a balancing act. But franchise agreements are one of those tools that local governments use to help them meet, you know, lots of things. It can be money makers for them. It can be, they can get policy done through them. But that would be an interesting thing to be looking at. And we're looking at it anyway. I'm not going to leave too many rocks unturned and try to figure that out. But again, the MRF, talking about MRF residuals and the whole idea of source separated, you know, clean MRFs, dirty MRFs, that type of thing, is I'm not really much of a, I'd like to find some endpoints and let creative people work to meet those, and try not to be too judgmental on stuff that's good or bad. But it speaks directly though to quality of materials and quantity of facilities or materials. As the cleaner things are from the front end, the higher value they have. So the more commingling we do, the more contamination we get, the more waste we get. So where do we get that balance where we get efficiencies and collections and quantities but keep the quality high? So I think it's definitely things we need to work on. So.
So we want to thank Carol hugely for coming down. Quick, clap, 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 clap. And also on the behalf of the Greater Chamber of Commerce, we have a hat for her. I don't know that it's made from recycled products, but Frank picked it to match her outfit, so he wants you to put it on for a picture.
You guys notice too,
Yeah, hey. So thank her very, very much. It's a real leader who will come out of her office to come out into the community and really see what people are doing here, and I think it just shows a huge amount of respect for the coalition that you have all put together, and we really appreciate her coming down. So now for our final, and Frank's getting the little placards up. He's Carol Merrill as well as Phil Donahue. But for our final presentation, We're going to have a group of folks talk about concepts for a recycling bin policy platform. So, it's all these ideas, but how do we really, it's what I keep sitting here wondering, how do we really bring things together with some concrete things that we can ask policy-wise to get done that will help us grow our economy? So we have bin coalition members Mandy Rose from CAR-MDZ, Lynn Frantz from CPSC, John Davis from CRA, and Steve Lautsy, who will, I think, moderate the question part. All right, so a big round of applause for them.
So we're all from the organization that has the falling banner. I'll stand up here for a second. I got some intro remarks. First, I wanted to ask the folks, how many of you are from the private sector today, profit or nonprofit? Awesome, we got you out to our event in the middle of your workday. Government? Wow, other, not raising your hand? Maybe about 1/3 of each. Oh, academic, okay. Bruce. So yeah, I'm Steve Lautsy. I'm the president of the California Association of Recycling Market Development Zones. I gotta say that very slow. Put on my hat because it's my cheap fashion trick. I always wear a hat. I want to thank Susan Eggman for being here and hanging around with us today and for the introduction to this panel. We'd love to work with you more and see how that comes out. Good luck. And I also wanted to thank the business representatives that sat on the earlier panel. It was really revealing and affirming of a lot of our agenda, but also sharing a lot of new information and perspectives that are good for the order of the coalition. I'm in thanking mode. I want to thank Carol, too, for being so open to working with us on growing California's recycling market development infrastructure as a priority for reaching the state's new 75% goal. We're committed to working with her and the folks on her team in the months and years ahead that we work on this agenda. And finally, in the thanks department, I want to thank Frank, try to embarrass him a little bit, the impresario for this event and in many ways for this coalition. When you encounter Frank almost anywhere else, he's the one pushing the agenda and grabbing the microphone and speaking into it. But when you're at one of his events here in Stockton, he melts into the background and makes sure that things go smoothly. So wherever you are now, Frank, thanks for all you've done, and thanks for gathering us again for the second year in a row at the BIN Summit. It's particularly exciting for me to be here today to see this many folks, including here in this room and joining us via the webinar. Hi there out there. Excited about issues we've been working on for years in the context of the California Association of RMDZs. Especially since I was missing in action for last year's historic first summit. I was in Kauai, as I recall, researching the Hawaiian beverage container law. But now we're really going to start the panel. As many of you know by now, the BIN Coalition was founded in the middle of last year by the Greater Stockton Chamber, the Association of RMDZs, the California Association for Local Economic Development, CalEd, and the California Product Stewardship Council. As of today, the coalition has grown to include 19 partners in public and private sector, with more expected to join in the weeks and months ahead. Our most recent partner that joined the coalition is MBA Polymers from Richmond, but also has 3 plants around the world, most of their 300 employees offshore, where they have EPR for electronic waste. They're very interested in seeing these issues keep more electronic waste in California. They specialize in recovering plastics from electronics and automobiles, but they're our most recent member of our coalition. Okay. Many, though by no means all, of the core ideas underpinning the coalition's agenda flowed from the strategic planning work done by my favorite organization, the California Association of RMDZs. Over the next hour or so, you'll hear from 4 leaders in the RMDZ program, which has 35 zones throughout California, encompassing more than half of the state's geographic area and half of its population. The individuals represent diversity and cross-disciplinary strength of the program, and also a lot of brain power applied to this intersection of economic and environmental issues. Yeah, that's you guys. They also represent different regions of California, north and south, urban, suburban, and rural areas of the state. So we're going to hear their best ideas for advancing the BIN agenda in the next 2-year legislative session. Your cheat sheet for this is the sheet you got when you came in, that 2-pager. We want you to embrace that, and we're going to embellish that a little bit in this session for work with the legislature and key agencies like CalRecycle and CARB. Following remarks from all 4 speakers, we'll take questions and comments before we adjourn for the day. Now we're really going to hear the first speaker. Because market development, like politics, is primarily local, we will hear first from John Davis, my predecessor as president of the CARMDZ, who is the administrator for the Mojave Desert and Mountain Recycling Authority, where he administers the High Desert RMDZ. John is also a past president and current advisor of another BIN partner organization, the California Resource Recovery Association, and is part of and co-authored as part of his ongoing climate action work with US EPA, the 2011 report entitled Reducing GHG Emissions Through Recycling and Composting. Let's welcome John Davis to talk about local government actions.
Thanks, Steve. So I live in the mountains, actually, in Southern California, and I've got some apple trees. And I guess the story with these apples is it would probably be a subdivision by now if it weren't for a group that decided to purchase land, take it off the market, and protect the farming activity in this setting. We're up against the national forest. I call it the urban-rural agricultural wilderness intersection. But we are fortunate to have somebody with some vision who said, you know, there's a different way to do things. And that group also at one time then acquired 400,000 acres of land from Catellis Corporation, the real estate arm of Santa Fe Railroad, gave it to the federal government, and recently, over the last 5 or 6 years, found that there's a lot of interest in developing that land for renewable energy sources. And part of that was this idea that if you took 50 square miles of the Mojave Desert and put in renewable energy, you could provide energy to the entire U.S. And that was a nice catchphrase. Unfortunately, some people took it to heart and began optioning very cheap land to basically destroy it in the interest of building large infrastructure. The point, I think, for our work is that it really gets down to the site. Where are you going to do things and how are you going to do it? The work that the Conservancy has been doing to try to pull back some of these activities on land that they purchased and gave to the federal government, that work has led to a real focus on how do you properly site facilities. And it's also led, I think, to the idea that if you can find the right location, then bring those resources to bear. And that's really what I want to speak to. And so every community in California has a general plan. In fact, it's required. And the general plan addresses land use, addresses conservation, noise, transportation, and a number of other elements. The guidelines for general plans are prepared by the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and they use those guidelines to review general plans when they're updated by communities, and so communities refer to these guidelines as they're considering their updates. The last set of guidelines was done in 2003, okay? So fortunately for us, we're at a point, if you can read this slide, that the Office of Planning and Research is updating their general plan guidelines and intend to issue that update in 2013. So here's an opportunity for us to look at probably the most comprehensive set of planning guidelines, certainly in California, and try to introduce some of our infrastructure, bin infrastructure ideas. So I think number one point is that all siting is local, and the Office of Planning and Research through these general plans provide us with the guidelines to begin to address some of the issues that we need to address. The last set of guidelines, if you look through there for industrial, language about industrial activity, it refers to environmental justice, and there's really nothing else. But these new guidelines, again, specifically talk about addressing greenhouse gas emission reductions. And of course, what we know, whoops, yeah. So what we know in the greenhouse gas side also flows from CEQA. So CEQA, as you all know, is this kind of step you have to go through to assess a project's issues, impacts, and also mitigation measures. It's another OPR, Office of Planning and Research, kind of managed activity statewide. So OPR issues guidelines on CEQA, and local governments carry it out through a set of laws and ongoing court battles. But the current, most recent guidelines on CEQA address determining the significant impacts from greenhouse gas emissions. And there's language throughout that I think play into our focus, and I'll show you why on the next slide. But for example, a local agency must make an effort to use scientific and factual data to describe, calculate, or estimate the amount of greenhouse gas emissions from a project. They can use a model or methodology to quantify greenhouse gas emissions. Well, guess what? We've got that. The Air Resources Board has adopted emission reduction factors for both composting and recycling, and they're very material specific. This is the sort of thing that we find as we look at the greenhouse gas reduction, because it's a result of energy conservation. And so if you look at, and I didn't bring the Air Resources Board slides because they're basically tables showing these reductions, but you compare materials in recycled to virgin materials, and you see these energy reductions across the board. The energy reductions are the greenhouse gas reductions. And what's important again for CEQA is that CEQA talks about not just greenhouse gas emission reductions, but also energy reductions. So the language from this section determining the impacts talks about increasing or reducing greenhouse gas emissions in a project. Well, if your project is using recycled content material, if your project is a composting facility, you're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions compared to the background setting. These are, again, energy savings compared to landfilling. If landfilling is the background setting, there's an abundance of information that shows the GHG and energy reduction comparison. And it plays right into CEQA. Appendix F of CEQA is about energy conservation. Measure the energy intensiveness of materials. Okay, so you can measure the energy intensiveness of virgin materials, recycled materials. You'll find a huge reduction in the use of those recycled materials. If you're a manufacturer using recycled materials, you should be able to present that in the CEQA process. Another one includes the siting and design to minimize energy consumption and reduce solid waste. This is language from CEQA. So the stage is set in there. I'm getting ready to go forward, I hope, with a food composting project, and I intend to try to insert some language into the CEQA just to begin to develop language. But I think we all need to do that and be aware of these links, and then let the Office of Planning and Research know so they can share it with all the municipalities across California. SB 375 is a bill that requires that local regional transportation agencies, particularly in the metropolitan areas, consider the sustainable effects of transportation planning. And I think the way we're going to get there is to talk about the jobs that are created locally near the housing that reduces commute hours and builds a more compact, sustainable community. This is a report by the TELUS Institute, More Jobs, Less Pollution, Growing the Recycling Infrastructure in the U.S., and it goes by material type, processing, manufacture, reuse, compares to landfilling. 20 times more jobs in the recycling arena than there are in landfilling or incineration, about 5 times more just in the processing side. And then for our standpoint, look at the jobs per 1,000 tons of material in the manufacturing. So address that SB 375 issue through job creation, and there's a lot of good evidence to show what those impacts are. And then the 75% that Carol talked about, these are my comments that I submitted on one of the first points in the public comment about strategic facilities and incentivizing facility siting. I have a background in an earlier stage of my career of recycling work. I'm sorry, before the recycling work, of redevelopment work. And in the redevelopment, and there's a lot of good people out there now who probably are ready to work on project-specific siting. And there's a process that you follow. CalEd, Michelle knows that process. You identify the community. You don't try to put, we're not going to try to put a compost facility in Beverly Hills. It's not going to happen, okay? But there are communities that want composting facilities, and we ought to be trying to put the compost facilities where they're wanted. And once you find those communities, then you find the right site. Not all sites are appropriate for all projects. And I get a lot of projects that appear with a property owner who's looking for something to put on his site. It's not always the best use, but it's a starting point. The site may not be the best location. If it is, then you enter into a development process. And I think what would be really interesting for us to work on over the next year is to try to package these incentives in a way that they can be presented to the right site under the right conditions and provide an incentive that will move a project along rather than the kind of stop and start and pushing that we see a lot of times to move a project. We're going to need a lot of facilities to handle 22 million tons plus what's being shipped out. So however 30, 40 million that we're going to have to deal with. I think a real focused effort to bring together incentives and focus them on the right site is something that we could all benefit from. So what I'm suggesting are these kind of 4 areas to address the recycled content manufacturing, reuse and composting, and the new OPR general plan guidelines. Try to link the CEQA's greenhouse gas guidelines to energy savings and greenhouse gas reduction through recycling and composting. And then emphasize local job creation and through recycling in the SB 375 plans, and assure that SB 341 has this focus on local site selection and project incentives. So I want to come up with this idea called recycling bin coefficient. It's to build incentives now, and I think it might catch on, so I look forward to working on it. Thanks.
So this guy works in local government. Pretty impressive, huh? Actually, the straighter line I'll say is this is the kind of thinking you get from somebody who works in an RMDZ, where they're actually trying to figure out ways to have value-added facilities in their area, and then we're lucky to get John to work on the statewide stage as well. I wanted to make an interstitial comment. One of the things you couldn't see on that one slide was the recycling of plastics, electronic scrap, and carpet realized the highest energy savings versus landfilling them. So And we also, something I meant to say at the top of the show, was actually part of Assemblymember Chesbrough's release on 341, quoted the following statistics. California's commitment to recycling has created 125,000 new jobs over the past 2 decades since AB 939 passed. The industry generates $4 billion a year in salaries and produces $10 billion worth of goods and services annually. So we're a big business. Our next speaker is Mandy Rose, the solid waste manager. I think she's the integrated waste manager for San Benito County, which is a sub-rural county south of Santa Clara County and east of Santa Cruz. Mandy is the zone administrator for one of the largest RMDZs in the state, comprising the 4 counties of San Benito, Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Luis Obispo. She's a member of our board of directors and was a leading voice in our organization for tying development of recycling market infrastructure to local sustainable economic development policy. Mandy's topic today concerns the need for and some pathways to greater regulatory certainty for recycle-based processors and manufacturers. Take it away, Mandy.
I had to get instructions on this here, guys. Sorry. Not used to having to do this. Okay. What I want to start off by saying is what I'm going to talk to you about today, I'm going to do something that I do best, which is I'm stealing everybody else's ideas. And that was the idea even before I came today, but when you see what I have to present, you will notice that you've heard some of these ideas earlier, probably a little bit more embellished as we go through them. I want to start off by just sort of setting the framework where when a business goes to select a site, they look for infrastructure, the government regulatory environment, what's the labor market look like, material supply, and transportation networks. So as Steve just told you, we're going to focus on the government regulatory environment and regulatory certainty. So what's the best course of action when you look at how to deal with regulations within government? Do we need new legislation? Do we need to get rid of some legislation? Do we need different policies? Or would an executive order work? And that's where we may look to our director, Carol, here to encourage the governor to sprinkle pixie dust in a lot of places to maybe expedite some of these things. But we'll see what ideas come out as we move forward. I have 3 basic, 1 minor idea, and that I'd like to present to you today as a way to encourage people to either expand or locate in California. John gave you some ideas about what he'd like to see in new general plans. I'm just going to give you one other one, and this has to do with siting of facilities. And what I'm suggesting here is, for those of you who are familiar with the housing element, I won't bore you with all the details. Those are the 5 different areas that you're required to do, but cities and counties are required to update their housing element every 5 years. Within that housing element, they are supposed to let everyone know where they are going to locate, on what land and what areas of their city or county, low, moderate, and higher income types of residential facility, or excuse me, residential housing. What I'm suggesting is using that template for recycling-based businesses and saying maybe in our general plans we need something specific for recycling-based businesses, and again every 5 years they've got to update it and tell us where we can locate these types of facilities. The next thing is create a model zoning ordinance. And back in 1996, and you've heard others talk about the bottle bill, and I can't believe it was 1986, but guess what, that was it. They did create a model ordinance that all cities and counties adopted. They worked with CSAC, League of Cities, Planning Directors Association, so it was something everybody could live with. How about if we create, again, a model zoning ordinance that when you come in with a recycling-based business, it's already been done for you. I can tell you from painful personal experience, as you know, I work for local government, and I have a project. I am trying to develop a resource recovery park. I started off because my planning department told me to use industrial zoning because that's where recycling resided in our particular county. We went through the EIR process, and of course we had A few residents come and tell us they didn't like that idea. They didn't like the idea of industrial zoning because it meant some ugly things to them, like nuclear power plants, etc. So now I'm revising my EIR, and we're creating our own resource recovery park zoning. So it sort of gave me the idea of if we had something that we could sort of plug and play for cities and counties, when a recycling-based business comes in, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to explain to the planning staff basically what a recycling business is. I think as Steve is off to say, in particular with the businesses he has in Oakland, he's constantly having to tell people, no, they're not all messy, they don't all create litter, they don't all, cause problems. As those of you here that are in a recycling-based business, you know that that's a stigma that you are fighting to overcome. So I think if we can get, again, a model zoning ordinance, people can just sort of walk in the door and use that. And Carol's already mentioned, I think it was in part of John's thing too, CalRecycle did the statewide EIR on anaerobic digestion. Executive summary, I just wanted you to see because I think this is kind of goes across all material types. Like one of the questionnaires said earlier, in 2011 they prepared a statewide EIR to assess the environmental effects that may result from the adoption of anaerobic digestion initiative to foster the development of AD facilities in California. Let's do more. Let's do them for C&D facilities. Let's do them for plastic. Let's do them for paper. Let's show people that we're serious about wanting this kind of business to create these kind of jobs in California to keep our materials here. Siting assistance, again, several of the other speakers have talked about this. I think if we get the general plan and model ordinances in place, I believe GoBiz already has a list, and we can help expand on that. Your RMDZs are already here are always here to help with siting assistance, but once we get these things rolling, and maybe we can get a statewide map of where we have existing businesses and where businesses may want to expand or could potentially locate. Incentives. Just suggesting review the criteria, not only in the regs that we deal with for RMDZ, but for the California Pollution Control Financing Authority. There's other sources of funding that let's just see if we need to tweak those a little bit so that they're more user-friendly to recycling-based businesses. And again, this was brought up earlier by some other speakers. We're trying to create jobs in California. Whose economy do you want to help? It was interesting to me when I was looking for slides, I found one that had the yin, and I thought, well, that's something. But this isn't about bashing our neighbors across the Pacific. This is more a shame on us. We need to get busy and build our infrastructure here in California. So here's my shameless plug for our coalition. If you haven't already joined, we would love to have you come on board. We think we've made some amazing strides in the last 18 months. We're looking forward to this next legislative session. And again, will it be legislation, change in policy, or executive order? But it's only going to happen with your partnership. Thank you.
A couple things is, if some of us are saying the same things, and we are from government and industry, again, that's a strength. If we're focused on the same stuff, that's an integration of opposites or extremes. The other thing I wanted to mention was another idea that's on your two-pager. Both of these folks work on the front lines in local government, so I don't think they wanted to say it was an idea that we should require 15 years of capacity for processing of organics and construction materials, because these are two sets of materials that are large streams, or the basis for this is AB 939 required counties to have 15 years of landfilling capacity. If with construction, demolition, and particularly organics, what you have is large streams with relatively low value that are very hard to cite. So why not have requirement that a county have a provision for 15 years of capacity, not necessarily in their county, but have to figure out where those materials are going to go in an adjacent county, possibly paying an adjacent county to take that material, but have a similar driver for these materials that are not going to go on a ship. They're not going to go to a foreign country, and in the case of organics, generate a lot of pretty high level of greenhouse gases, and we need to keep them out of the landfill. So that's one idea. The other thing I like to talk about is infrastructure is in the name of the coalition, but fairly unique to materials management. We're talking about private infrastructure. We're used to thinking of infrastructure as the wastewater treatment plant or the power plant. So maybe analogous to distributed energy, now we're talking about in materials management having different facilities for different materials representing privately, public good, but privately capitalized infrastructure. So it's not exactly the classic infrastructure model like building a road. Is that it? I think that's it. Set up for Lynn. The next speaker is the third speaker on the panel today is a person we affectionately refer to as the One Woman Coalition. Lynn France is the Solid Waste Manager for Chula Vista, California, and the RMDZ Administrator for North San Diego County Zone. Beyond those roles, Lynn is also the Secretary of our board, the CARMDZ, the Policy Chair for CRRA, which I mentioned before, the California Resource Recovery Association, also a member of this coalition, and a board member for a third partner in the coalition, the California Product Stewardship Council. It's primarily with this third hat on from the CPSC that Lynn will discuss the promise and challenges of advancing recycling market infrastructure formation using an extended producer responsibility framework. CPSC has led efforts to pass EPR legislation for paint and carpets in recent years. Lynn will share some lessons learned that can inform similar efforts going forward. Welcome, One Woman Coalition, Lynn France.
Good. Yay, Chargers. I'm sorry. How many of you have heard of the California Product Stewardship Council before? Okay. How many of you think you know what producer responsibility is and extended producer responsibility? Ooh, not a little more tentative in the hands. The California Product Stewardship Council was actually founded by local governments who were getting very frustrated with having to deal with products that were toxic or hazardous with the public funds. And the fact that the manufacturers of these products had no responsibility for the end-of-life management, so it was all put on local government. And then as these products became banned from landfill disposal, we had to try to figure out what to do with them. And after a while, a bunch of us got together and said, oh no, we're mad as heck and we're not going to take this anymore and we can't do it. So we formed the California Product Stewardship Council. Since we formed, which was in 2006, so we're in 2007, somewhere in there, we have now broadened, and our message seems to resonate not just with local governments, but also with the private sector for the businesses that are doing the right things for the right reasons. So we're really proud to say that we have grown from a local government agency to a much broader coalition, and it's from that platform that I'm standing in front of you today, because when we started talking about recycling bin, build infrastructure now, it made so much sense when you start looking at who the players are, who we need to pull together as stakeholders. And yes, we did start this discussion with the Recycling Market Development Zone administrators saying, how can we make this happen? Let's put the pieces together. So from the California Product Stewardship Council's side of things, producer responsibility is what a manufacturer has for their products on a voluntary basis. It's what kind of materials they put into it, how they think about their product at the end of life, if they think about their product at the end of life, where extended producer responsibility is legislated responsibility, which puts in requirements for meeting recycling goals and mandates and dates, and includes government oversight by CalRecycle to make sure that those dates and that those diversion requirements are met. The whole idea behind product stewardship is to make sure that we have some way to improve product design or packaging or reduce the toxics, improve end-of-life recyclability, and help develop a greener supply chain. Generally, we look at it as applied to problem products. But as the word has gotten out and as more people start to focus on this, we find that people are trying to apply producer responsibility to all kinds of things. There's talk about packaging and cardboard and plastics and some other things. But from the California Product Stewardship perspective, we are just looking at this as dealing with toxics, hazardous materials. Eventually that could grow. I mean, we just had a bill for mattresses that seemed to be a real problem throughout the state. It didn't get passed, but a lot of work was put into that bill to make it a producer responsibility bill. California has 3 extended producer responsibility bills. Mercury thermostats, the kind in the old houses where you used to set your heater or your air conditioner by. There is a producer responsibility bill for that. There are some problems with the bill. The diversion goals aren't really being met. CalRecycle is working on that with the industry. And then more recently, we've had a paint bill and a carpet bill. So we have 3 bills that we have some experience with. The paint bill and the carpet bill are just now being implemented. But we have learned a few things as those bills have started their rollout or their implementation, that when we start looking at legislation in the future, we want to make sure that all of the EPR framework includes utilization and expansion of the existing industries that are already recycling or dealing with these products, and that any new manufacturing or new infrastructure is built in California. I'll give you an example. The carpet industry, when the carpet bill was passed, and they got ready to start putting together their plan about how they were going to handle the product at the end of life, came to the California Product Stewardship Council and basically said, well, this is all well and good, but we're going to put our plant in Reno and Phoenix. And we're like, whoa, 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 wait a minute, that's not what we expected. That's not what we thought it. So we realized we need to be more specific in the legislation we write to make sure that these facilities are here in California. We want new EPR initiatives also to really take into account existing infrastructure and existing capacity. One of the things we found is that these smaller recyclers, where did Arthur go? Did he just leave? There he is. The smaller recyclers that weren't necessarily addressed in the plans that the industry were putting together. And part of the reason for that is, and I think, this is purely speculation on my part, is the small recyclers have operated for a long time kind of under the radar. So nobody, they go about their business. It's on a cash basis, a lot of it. And so they really didn't have a coalition. And when these bills started to come into being, they realized they needed to stand up and stand together and make sure they were recognized. And so that's one of the benefits of this infrastructure, the Recycling Bin Build Infrastructure Now coalition, is to pull all those types of people into this discussion and make sure we have all those stakeholders at the table. And then the other thing that, again, emphasizing what everyone else has said, new facilities should be developed within California, and we need to make sure that all the legislation coming out in the future will include that, or at least a good stab at that from that point on. So thank you. I'll be happy to answer questions later, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. Knowing we're running down to the end of our time, I get to bat last, knowing also that I haven't been cheated for airtime thus far in this session. But basically, I want you to go put your hands on the 2-page agenda that you got. We finally got our agenda, or that was one of the goals coming into this meeting at the summit. The second-year summit was to get everything on 2 pages. And so this is subject to your comments and review, or if you can make it better, we want to hear that too. This is our attempt to summarize where we are at this juncture that you can take out of here and share with possible other partners in the coalition or decision makers. So our speakers thus far have hit some of these points on this list. I'm going to get onto them, but first I'm going to read this touching preamble. This policy agenda is put forward in the context of high unemployment and a weak economy in much of California, and on the heels of passage of last year's AB 341, the mandate for 75% recycling in California by 2020, as well as the implementation of cap and trade system as part of the rollout of AB 32 of 2006, which seeks to cut greenhouse gas generation in California. The cap and trade system, for the folks who don't know it, here in the room or at home, levies fees on large-scale generators of greenhouse gases and allows for investment of these funds in activities that mitigate high emissions from fossil fuels. It is the central thesis of the Recycling Bin Coalition that developing enhanced domestic market infrastructure for recyclable materials collected currently and under 341 can address this policy mandate while reducing GHG generation in California. Making things at home can create high-quality jobs for California while avoiding the higher GHG generation associated with transport and manufacturing in China and other export markets, especially since so much manufacturing in China is powered by coal as opposed to California's cleaner energy mix. While we know there is a range of opinion on whether cap and trade is really necessary or beneficial under current economic conditions in California, it's also clear that the legislature and the courts have affirmed that the system will go forward in November. In light of this fact, the Bin Coalition and its many partners stand well positioned to benefit from the system and to deliver real benefits as well. By adding value to recycled materials collected in California, recycling-based processors and manufacturers can create thousands of new jobs and reduce the state's carbon footprint instead of sending 80% of those materials overseas as we are doing now in some cases. So with that as a setup, I'm going to go on to that sheet I just asked you to pick up, and we're going to cover some of the items that I have it. Yes, I have it. Just going to run through this list, and then we're going to open up for Q&A and comments from the group. The first item is revitalize the RMDZ loan fund. The soundbite on that is as follows. 5 of the last 6 years, the program has lent less than $5 million to various entrepreneurs across 35 recycling market development zones, whereas over $10 million was lent in 5 of the previous 8 years. Even though policy drivers such as AB 341 and AB 32 suggest strongly we should be doing more in this area. So we think this is a great use for cap and trade funds, and we want to pursue that and focus on that with CARB and the legislature in the next year. Extended producer responsibility you just heard about from Lynn. I will let that stand and go on to market and development incentive payments. Frank Savitovac talked about the advantages to his business of the market development incentive payments. We need to call out our other, one of our other partners, CAW, Californians Against Waste, that worked on that piece of legislation and that model. Frank said it doesn't take any tax dollars, but that's because the bottle bill has its own funding that these incentive payments are drawn from. So again, if cap and trade funds can be brought to bear either for priority materials or in some other scheme to expand incentives for California-based manufacturers to utilize recyclables in their products, that's a model we think is really interesting and worth expanding, but not sure we can go statewide on all materials tomorrow or in year 1. Grant funding for MRFs and organics and C&D processing facilities to increase recovery of value-added feedstocks from mixed materials. This is, I think, trying to make MRFs better. Doesn't really get to the source separation versus commingled question per se, but how do we get more out of our MRFs? How do we get more yield and higher quality materials for manufacturers out of our existing facilities? And we certainly need to think about that going forward in designing new facilities, or possibly dual stream collection. that's a random comment from me. Purchasing, state agencies. There's a lot of state purchasing mandates on the books that are being implemented to some extent. And more needs to be done. Again, gentleman from Golden Byproducts talked about the utilization rate for Caltrans on crumb rubber. But the idea is create preference for products made in California over those imported from other states and countries. Sounds basic, right? Keeping the GHG footprint and revenue for those products within California. And this is where I parrot Arnold Schwarzenegger. We need something that is similar to his campaign, but be Californian, buy California, made with recycled content. Anyway, maybe that worked for you. We're getting to the end of my remarks here. Final one is research and development. Again, Brian was talking about, and Carol were both talking about research and development at UC Davis. The RMDZ program would like to see at least one north and one south node where recycling-based entrepreneurs could go engage with academia or mechanical engineers. It's theoretically within the California state system to work on these problems to make it assist entrepreneurs with solving some of the engineering problems of using recycled materials. So I think that gets through our list. We do want, this is a living, working document like all things in the coalition, and we'd love to hear your ideas, and I'm ready to entertain Q&A and comments.
We got one back here.
Thank you, Frank. My name is Frank Ramirez. I'm with the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, and my role here today was to listen and learn. We're very excited. We've just hired a director today. The governor announced that appointment, and we're going to be rolling out some interesting projects on regulatory reform, and I'm sure we'll be working very closely with Carol on recycling and other state agencies. So thank you, and this is a very good effort here.
Thanks for coming, Frank.
Thanks. Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Bruce from San Jose State University, the Environmental Studies Department. I like the idea, and I'm a former planning commissioner, so it was interesting to hear this idea about a new element or adding to an element in the state general plan. But my thought on that is that the problem we have is that we have a linear system that needs to turn into a closed loop system, and there's a concept for that. It's called industrial ecology, where the waste of one industry becomes the resource of another to make a product. I think that's much more encompassing rather than just being narrowly focused on recycling. Recycling relates to multiple benefits. The other thing is I'm thinking about priority materials. Packaging is the top discard in the United States and California, over a third. And it seems to me that if we had producer responsibility there and requiring recycled content, that's going to create jobs, and many of them. So if we had eco-industrial parks where the waste becomes new product, that's going to create this whole solution, or that's part of it. Any thoughts on those things?
Just one thing, Bruce, on the kind of industrial focus for planning. I tried to do some research. I thought, well, let me find out what California's sustainable industrial policy, green industrial policy might be, or how it's approached. I couldn't find that, so I thought, well, let me look at the state's policies on industrial development, on manufacturing in California, and maybe I can tweak that a little bit just for my own. So I couldn't find anything. And so maybe the element needs to be, manufacturing and industry generally. There's a lot of apocryphal ideas about what prevents people from making things in California. We know people are making things in California, so in my mind, there's a big gap. And I think that's a topic that really needs to be aired out, and it's not just our focus on the industry. It's a bigger topic.
On the packaging issue, I would say big product area, probably getting to some First Amendment rights issues. From my experience, if you try to mess with packaging as a category of EPR, but on the other side, thinking about how things are connected, and eco parks, kind of an oblique answer maybe, but one of my ideas out of working with the RMDZ loan fund was a notion of using cap and trade dollars for a loan program across industries for reducing GHGs. So this would be a big loan fund, similar. You'd have to figure out how to administer that, but the notion is businesses that wanted to improve their process for GHGs would have access to capital for that purpose. Might create some of those linkages you're talking about, but my experience with eco parks is they're a lot harder to do than they are to talk about, at least in Oakland. Just because sometimes when the companies are ready, the land is not ready, and the land is ready, the companies aren't there. That's my experience.
Okay, next question.
Got it. Thanks, Frank. I've got a question for John and also a comment. John, sort of piggybacking on the comments from the gentleman from San Jose State, had you considered actually introducing recycling and waste as an 8th element in the general plan process?
Yeah, I worked in an area that had a specific plan for an industrial area, and it specifically allowed recycling as a permitted use. We put a facility in that area and then went back to expand the facility. The specific plan had sunsetted, and the new specific plan over the area changed the use to light industrial and made the existing use non-conforming. So when we found that out, fortunately the facility had enough leverage to go back in and correct the oversight, but you know, and then what we find is when you go into the manufacturing uses, you find a lot of things about prohibiting outdoor storage or processing, and for some elements in the recycling industry, that's a big deal. If you can't store material outside, then you're building, you know, a huge building to move material through. So there are a lot of specific development standards that tend to throw things into a heavy industrial use where they may not really need to be there because of the nature of the industry that we're dealing with. So yeah, there's definitely, I think Mandy's suggestion that maybe there needs to be some model ordinance developed would be really useful on the manufacturing side.
And I've also got a quick comment or a suggestion in that if recycling and waste were elevated to an 8th element of the general plan guidance, it would be very useful from the standpoint of each jurisdiction would have to go through the general plan EIR process, quantifying what's going on with both approved, franchise, and also pirate activities. And so with that, that would allow the aggregation of data much more easier on a uniform basis throughout the jurisdictions. But I look forward to discussing this with you further. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Let's get it from a student. No, not you, Nick.
Hi, my name is Adam Torres. I attend Bear Creek High School in North Stockton. As a student, and as you guys were saying, all this stuff, it's really new to me. And as somebody who's going to be voting soon, I'm just trying to see if you guys have any ways of trying to get this out to the public more, for more people to understand, for more people to hear. Because honestly, a lot of the stuff that I heard today from the public speakers, I had no clue what they're talking about. So I'm glad that I'm able to be here and listen to this, but I was wondering what you guys were doing to help other people my age who are soon going to have to take over your positions in a few years to kind of understand why is this important and how you're going to teach us or teach people to, you know, learn about this. How are we going to learn?
Don't walk away, Frank, because I have questions back. What brought you here today? Why did you attend today?
Don't stay in car. Yeah. I'm mostly here for my senior project. My senior project is I'm trying to get recycling bins into my school. Now, the time that I've been here and what I've been hearing from multiple people is there's a lot more I can be doing for my school than just adding recycling bins. I can get completely new programs I had no idea about. So being able to come here has kind of helped me expand and try to do more for my school. And I'm glad I attended. At first, I thought it was going to be quite boring meeting, but as it turns out, turns out, it was extremely helpful, and I'm glad I came. I honestly am.
Well, we're very glad you came too, because we get so used to talking amongst ourselves in problem solving. So thank you for coming. It's good to have an outsider start listening to us.
I have one small suggestion. I've heard of an organization called Green Team San Joaquin. I'm wondering if they could go to this school and help them. Have you heard of that organization, Mr. Farrell?
You know, it does ring a bell.
Yeah.
And we will be reaching out our BEA coordinator over there, Dylan. Talk to him right after, and we'll get you guys involved. Actually, right now with Merlot Institute at Stockton Unified School, we are replicating our recon program with them. That's why they're wearing the red coats today. But so we've been proactively working with the school districts as well. Steve?
It's really great feedback, because it's like, this is cool stuff you never understood, but how are we going to get the word out? One thing is the meaning of the word recycling in our culture. It's like when we got the 1 through 7 on the plastic containers with the chasing arrows, everybody thought all plastics that had those arrows were recyclable. So that was a problem with the term recycle. Too often, you say put out the recycling in front of your house. That's the term that suggests the process is completed. So I think that's the thing that might make it, or that to us too, is recycling isn't recycling until you go all the way from a material to a new product, as opposed to, if it goes to China or if it goes into a different product. So we need to simplify and get that message out. I think marketing, some of the businesses talked about marketing and getting the consumers involved in knowing what's going on. Then the other side of it, I would say, is Frank breaks down our whole agenda to jobs, jobs, jobs. So that's either too simple or that's it.
Well, it is. And, if you're going to divert, you must convert.
That's it.
I mean, that's just the bottom line.
That's good.
I'm gonna make a shameless announcement. We just sponsored a program called Curiosity Quest. It's on a lot of the PBS stations around California, and they have a Go Green segment. And I've seen the final cut and edits, and it's actually where we brought a third grade class to our recycling facility, and they posed questions to the Curiosity Quest team about where does that stuff go and what happens to it, and how does it get in a baler and what happens. And so I'll make sure that Frank knows when the Curiosity Quest segment is available. But it was designed just to kind of answer those questions, and when you answer them at a third grade level, you find out that probably reaches most people pretty well. So that might help get the word out.
Excellent. We'll get the last question right here. Roger Crane.
Thank you. Roger Crane, I'm the instructor of the Green Technology Academy at Bear Creek High School. Adam is one of my students, and along with Mason and Thomas here. I'm sitting here exploding with ideas, and part of an answer to Adam's question might be use schools as a source for maybe some video clips. We have departments sitting there waiting to do videos. Maybe generate some commercials. Get cross schools going into Northern California and try to get the word out. Maybe get some air time to air some commercials and that kind of stuff. And
does that mean you're joining our coalition?
well, to answer that question, also we're part of California Partnership Academy. So his how do you get here was through this Partnership Academy grant that Merlot also has, right? You have yeah. Good. And there's a number of schools around here in the state of California. That's how we generated our
We'd like to have
money
you.
to come here. So. Yes.
Yeah, just a reminder, on October 30th, we do have our Pathways to Green Schools. It's helping academic institutions green their facilities, as well as assist them with their green curriculum to prepare our next generation of workforce. Shameless plug, huh, Steve? Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Susan Eggman. Let's have a round of applause for
the panel. All right, and we want to, one more time, thank our sponsors. Sponsors are very important. Without this, nothing could happen. Thank all of you for coming today. Thanks to the folks joining us on the webinar. And always thank Frank Farrell for his energy, and hope he drinks enough water to stay hydrated. I mean, I think I think everybody came out of here with some more really good ideas, but I hope we just go out and preach this gospel, right? I mean, it's those questions about where do my tires go? Where does this product come from? What's the end product of this? I mean, the more you ask those questions in your neighborhoods, in your families, everywhere else, the more everybody starts to think about it. Because I think the number one thing we need to do is jump over the wall of apathy and just get back into the place of curiosity and asking questions. And those kinds of questions create jobs, because what we're talking about is common sense stuff right here, right? It's all common sense stuff that we used to do back in the day. How do I use this 50 more times? That's what we need to do to restart our economy right here. So thank you all again for out here being the pioneers and leading this charge. Thank the young people for being here today. Thank those who have on the other end of the spectrum for your wisdom and your years in the trenches. And together we go forward. Thank you very much, and have a safe trip home.
Exciting and new, come aboard. We're expecting you and love, life's sweetest reward. Let it flow, it floats back to you. The love boat, soon we'll be making another run. The love boat promises something for everyone. Set a course for adventure, your mind on a new romance and love. Won't hurt anymore. It's an open smile on a friendly shore. It's love. Welcome aboard. It's love. Exciting and new, come aboard. We're expecting you and love, life's sweetest reward. Let it flow, it floats back to you.